Chapter 28 of Cousin Betty by Honoré de Balzac. Translated by James Waring. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Bruce Peary. Chapter 28. Lisbeth, to all appearance at war with Madame Marneffe, had taken up her abode with Marshal Hulot. 10 days after these events, the banns of marriage were published between the old maid and the distinguished old officer, to whom, to win his consent, Adeline had related the financial disaster that had befallen her Hector, begging him never to mention it to the Baron, who was, as she said, much saddened, quite depressed and crushed. "Alas, he is as old as his years," she added. So Lisbeth had triumphed. She was achieving the object of her ambition. She would see the success of her scheme and her hatred gratified. She delighted in the anticipated joy of reigning supreme over the family who had so long looked down upon her. Yes, she would patronize her patrons. She would be the rescuing angel who would dole out a livelihood to the ruined family. She addressed herself as Madame la Comtesse and Madame la Maréchale, curtsying in front of a glass. Adeline and Hortense should end their days in struggling with poverty, while she, a visitor at the Tuileries, would lord it in the fashionable world. A terrible disaster overthrew the old maid from the social heights where she so proudly enthroned herself. On the very day when the bans were first published, the Baron received a second message from Africa. Another Alsatian arrived, handed him a letter after assuring himself that he spoke to Baron Hulot, and after giving the Baron the address of his lodgings, bowed himself out, leaving the great man stricken by the opening lines of this letter: "Dear nephew, you will receive this letter by my calculations on the 7th of August. Supposing it takes you 3 days to send us the help we need, and that it is a fortnight on the way here, that brings us to the 1st of September. If you can act decisively within that time, you will have saved the honor and the life of yours sincerely, Johann Fischer. This is what I am required to demand by the clerk you have made my accomplice. For I am amenable, it would seem, to the law at the assizes or before a council of war. Of course you understand that Johann Fischer will never be brought to the bar of any tribunal. He will go of his own act, to appear at that of God. Your clerk seems to me a bad lot, quite capable of getting you into hot water. But he is as clever as any rogue. He says the line for you to take is to call out louder than anyone, and to send out an inspector, a special commissioner, to discover who is really guilty, rake up abuses, and make a fuss, in short. But if we stir up the struggle, who will stand between us and the law? If your commissioner arrives here by the 1st of September, and you have given him your orders, sending by him 200,000 francs, to place in our storehouses the supplies we profess to have secured in remote country places, we shall be absolutely solvent and regarded as blameless. You can trust the soldier who is the bearer of this letter with a draft in my name on a house in Algiers. He is a trustworthy fellow, a relation of mine, incapable of trying to find out what he is the bearer of. I have taken measures to guarantee the fellow's safe return. If you can do nothing, I am ready and willing to die for the man to whom we owe our Adeline's happiness." The anguish and raptures of passion, and the catastrophe which had checked his career of profligacy, had prevented Baron Hulot's ever thinking of poor Johann Fischer, though his first letter had given warning of the danger now become so pressing. The Baron went out of the dining room in such agitation that he literally dropped onto a sofa in the drawing room. He was stunned, sunk in the dull numbness of a heavy fall. He stared at a flower on the carpet, quite unconscious that he still held in his hand Johann's fatal letter. Adeline, in her room, heard her husband throw himself on the sofa like a lifeless mass. The noise was so peculiar that she fancied he had an apoplectic attack. She looked through the door at the mirror, in such dread as stops the breath and hinders motion, and she saw her Hector in the attitude of a man crushed. The Baroness stole in on tiptoe. Hector heard nothing. She went close up to him, saw the letter, took it, read it, trembling in every limb. She went through one of those violent nervous shocks that leave their traces forever on the sufferer. Within a few days she became subject to a constant trembling, for after the first instant the need for action gave her such strength as can only be drawn from the very wellspring of the vital powers. "Hector, come into my room," said she, in a voice that was no more than a breath. "Do not let your daughter see you in this state. Come, my dear, come." 200,000 francs! Where can I find them? I can get Claude Vignon sent out there as a commissioner. He is a clever, intelligent fellow; that is a matter of a couple of days. But 200,000 francs! My son has not so much. His house is loaded with mortgages for 300,000. My brother has saved 30,000 francs at most. Nucingen would simply laugh at me. Vauvinet? He was not very ready to lend me the 10,000 francs I wanted to make up the sum for that villain Marneffe's boy. No, it is all up with me. I must throw myself at the Prince's feet, confess how matters stand, hear myself told that I am a low scoundrel, and take his broadside so as to go decently to the bottom." "But, Hector, this is not merely ruin, it is disgrace," said Adeline. "My poor uncle will kill himself. Only kill us, yourself and me; you have a right to do that, but do not be a murderer. Come, take courage. There must be some way out of it." "Not one," said Hulot. "No one in the Government could find 200,000 francs, not if it were to save an administration. Oh, Napoleon, where art thou?" "My uncle, poor man! Hector, he must not be allowed to kill himself in disgrace." "There is one more chance," said he, "but a very remote one. Yes, Crevel is at daggers drawn with his daughter. He has plenty of money. He alone could." "Listen, Hector. It will be better for your wife to perish than to leave our uncle to perish. And your brother, the honor of the family!" cried the Baroness, struck by a flash of light. "Yes, I can save you all. Good God, what a degrading thought! How could it have occurred to me?" She clasped her hands, dropped on her knees, and put up a prayer. On rising, she saw such a crazy expression of joy on her husband's face that the diabolical suggestion returned, and then Adeline sank into a sort of idiotic melancholy. "Go, my dear, at once to the War Office," said she, rousing herself from this torpor. "Try to send out a commission; it must be done. Get round the Marshal, and on your return at 5 o'clock you will find perhaps, yes, you shall find 200,000 francs. Your family, your honor as a man, as a State official, a Councillor of State, your honesty, your son, all shall be saved. But your Adeline will be lost, and you will see her no more. Hector, my dear," said she, kneeling before him, clasping and kissing his hand, "give me your blessing. Say farewell." It was so heartrending that Hulot put his arms round his wife, raised her and kissed her, saying, "I do not understand." "If you did," said she, "I should die of shame, or I should not have the strength to carry out this last sacrifice." "Breakfast is served," said Mariette. Hortense came in to wish her parents good morning. They had to go to breakfast and assume a false face. "Begin without me, I will join you," said the Baroness. She sat down to her desk and wrote as follows: "My dear Monsieur Crevel, I have to ask a service of you. I shall expect you this morning, and I count on your gallantry, which is well known to me, to save me from having too long to wait for you. Your faithful servant, Adeline Hulot. "Louise," said she to her daughter's maid, who waited on her, "take this note down to the porter and desire him to carry it at once to this address, and wait for an answer." The Baron, who was reading the news, held out a Republican paper to his wife, pointing to an article and saying, "Is there time?" This was the paragraph, one of the terrible notes with which the papers spice their political bread and butter. "A correspondent in Algiers writes that such abuses have been discovered in the commissariat transactions of the province of Oran that the law is making inquiries. The peculation is self-evident, and the guilty persons are known. If severe measures are not taken, we shall continue to lose more men through the extortion that limits their rations than by Arab steel or the fierce heat of the climate. We await further information before enlarging on this deplorable business. We need no longer wonder at the terror caused by the establishment of the press in Africa, as was contemplated by the Charter of 1830. "I will dress and go to the minister," said the Baron, as they rose from the table. "Time is precious. A man's life hangs on every minute." "Oh, mamma, there is no hope for me!" cried Hortense, and, unable to check her tears, she handed to her mother a number of the Revue des Beaux-Arts. Madame Hulot's eye fell on a print of the group of Delilah by Count Steinbock, under which were the words, "The property of Madame Marneffe." The very first lines of the article, signed V, showed the talent and friendliness of Claude Vignon. "Poor child!" said the Baroness. Alarmed by her mother's tone of indifference, Hortense looked up, saw the expression of a sorrow before which her own paled, and rose to kiss her mother, saying, "What is the matter, mamma? What is happening? Can we be more wretched than we are already?" "My child, it seems to me that in what I am going through to day, my past dreadful sorrows are as nothing. When shall I have ceased to suffer?" "In heaven, mother," said Hortense solemnly. "Come, my angel, help me to dress. No, no, I will not have you help me in this. Send me Louise." Adeline, in her room, went to study herself in the glass. She looked at herself closely and sadly, wondering to herself, "Am I still handsome? Can I still be desirable? Am I not wrinkled?" She lifted up her fine golden hair, uncovering her temples. They were as fresh as a girl's. She went further, she uncovered her shoulders, and was satisfied; nay, she had a little feeling of pride. The beauty of really handsome shoulders is one of the last charms a woman loses, especially if she has lived chastely. Adeline chose her dress carefully, but the pious and blameless woman is decent to the end, in spite of her little coquettish graces. Of what use were brand new gray silk stockings and high heeled satin shoes, when she was absolutely ignorant of the art of displaying a pretty foot at a critical moment, by obtruding it an inch or two beyond a half lifted skirt, opening horizons to desire? She put on, indeed, her prettiest flowered muslin dress, with a low body and short sleeves; but, horrified at so much bareness, she covered her fine arms with clear gauze sleeves, and hid her shoulders under an embroidered cape. Her curls, à l'anglaise, struck her as too fly away. She subdued their airy lightness by putting on a very pretty cap. But, with or without the cap, would she have known how to twist the golden ringlets so as to show off her taper fingers to admiration? As to rouge, the consciousness of guilt, the preparations for a deliberate fall, threw this saintly woman into a state of high fever, which, for the time, revived the brilliant coloring of youth. Her eyes were bright, her cheeks glowed. Instead of assuming a seductive air, she saw in herself a look of barefaced audacity which shocked her. Lisbeth, at Adeline's request, had told her all the circumstances of Wenceslas' infidelity. and the Baroness had learned, to her utter amazement, that in one evening, in one moment, Madame Marneffe had made herself the mistress of the bewitched artist. "How do these women do it?" the Baroness had asked Lisbeth. There is no curiosity so great as that of virtuous women on such subjects. They would like to know the arts of vice and remain immaculate. "Why, they are seductive, it is their business," said Cousin Betty. "Valerie that evening, my dear, was, I declare, enough to bring an angel to perdition." "But tell me how she set to work." "There is no principle, only practice in that walk of life," said Lisbeth ironically. The Baroness, recalling this conversation, would have liked to consult Cousin Betty, but there was no time for that. Poor Adeline, incapable of imagining a patch, of pinning a rosebud in the very middle of her bosom, of devising the tricks of the toilet intended to resuscitate the ardors of exhausted nature, was merely well dressed. A woman is not a courtesan for the wishing. Woman is soup for man, as Molière says by the mouth of the judicious Gros Rene. This comparison suggests a sort of culinary art in love. Then the virtuous wife would be a Homeric meal, flesh laid on hot cinders. The courtesan, on the contrary, is a dish by Carême, with its condiments, spices, and elegant arrangement. The Baroness could not, did not know how to serve up her fair bosom in a lordly dish of lace, after the manner of Madame Marneffe. She knew nothing of the secrets of certain attitudes. This high-souled woman might have turned round and round 100 times, and she would have betrayed nothing to the keen glance of a profligate. To be a good woman and a prude to all the world, and a courtesan to her husband, is the gift of a woman of genius, and they are few. This is the secret of long fidelity, inexplicable to the women who are not blessed with the double and splendid faculty. Imagine Madame Marneffe virtuous, and you have the Marchese di Pescara. But such lofty and illustrious women, beautiful as Diane de Poitiers, but virtuous, may be easily counted. So the scene with which this serious and terrible drama of Paris manners opened was about to be repeated, with this singular difference, that the calamities prophesied then by the captain of the municipal militia had reversed the parts. Madame Hulot was awaiting Crevel with the same intentions as had brought him to her, smiling down at the Paris crowd from his milord 3 years ago. And, strangest thing of all, the Baroness was true to herself and to her love, while preparing to yield to the grossest infidelity, such as the storm of passion even does not justify in the eyes of some judges. "What can I do to become a Madame Marneffe?" she asked herself as she heard the doorbell. She restrained her tears, fever gave brilliancy to her face, and she meant to be quite the courtesan. Poor noble soul! "What the devil can that worthy Baronne Hulot want of me?" Crevel wondered as he mounted the stairs. "She is going to discuss my quarrel with Celestine and Victorin, no doubt, but I will not give way." As he went into the drawing-room, shown in by Louise, he said to himself, as he noted the bareness of the place, Crevel's word, "Poor woman, she lives here like some fine picture stowed in a loft by a man who knows nothing of painting." Crevel, seeing Comte Popinot, the Minister of Commerce, buy pictures and statues, wanted also to figure as a Maecenas of Paris, whose love of art consists in making good investments. Adeline smiled graciously at Crevel, pointing to a chair facing her. "Here I am, fair lady, at your command," said Crevel. Monsieur the Mayor, a political personage, now wore black broadcloth. His face, at the top of this solemn suit, shone like a full moon rising above a mass of dark clouds. His shirt, buttoned with 3 large pearls, worth 500 francs apiece, gave a great idea of his thoracic capacity, and he was apt to say, "In me you see the coming athlete of the tribune." His enormous, vulgar hands were encased in yellow gloves even in the morning. His patent leather boots spoke of the chocolate-colored coupe with 1 horse, in which he drove. In the course of 3 years, ambition had altered Crevel's pretensions. Like all great artists, he had come to his second manner. In the great world, when he went to the Prince de Wissembourg's, to the prefecture, to Comte Popinot's, and the like, he held his hat in his hand in an airy manner, taught him by Valerie, and he inserted the thumb of the other hand in the armhole of his waistcoat with a knowing air and a simpering face and expression. This new grace of attitude was due to the satirical inventiveness of Valerie, who, under pretence of rejuvenating her mare, had given him an added touch of the ridiculous. "I begged you to come, my dear, kind Monsieur Crevel," said the Baroness in a husky voice, "on a matter of the greatest importance." "I can guess what it is, madame," said Crevel with a knowing air, "but what you would ask is impossible. Oh, I am not a brutal father, a man, to use Napoleon's words, set hard and fast on sheer avarice. Listen to me, fair lady. If my children were ruining themselves for their own benefit, I would help them out of the scrape. But as for backing your husband, madame, it is like trying to fill the vat of the Danaides. Their house is mortgaged for 300,000 francs for an incorrigible father. Why, they have nothing left, poor wretches, and they have no fun for their money. All they have to live upon is what Victorin may make in court. He must wag his tongue more, must monsieur your son. And he was to have been a minister, that learned youth, our hope and pride. A pretty pilot who runs aground like a landlubber, for if he had borrowed to enable him to get on, if he had run into debt for feasting deputies, winning votes, and increasing his influence, I should be the first to say, 'Here is my purse, dip your hand in, my friend.' But when it comes of paying for papa's folly, folly I warned you of, his father has deprived him of every chance of power. It is I who shall be minister." "Alas, my dear Crevel, it has nothing to do with the children, poor devoted souls. If your heart is closed to Victorin and Celestine, I shall love them so much that perhaps I may soften the bitterness of their souls caused by your anger. You are punishing your children for a good action." "Yes, for a good action badly done, that is half a crime," said Crevel, much pleased with his epigram. "Doing good, my dear Crevel, does not mean sparing money out of a purse that is bursting with it. It means enduring privations to be generous, suffering for liberality. It is being prepared for ingratitude. Heaven does not see the charity that costs us nothing." "Saints, madame, may, if they please, go to the workhouse. They know that it is for them the door of heaven. For my part, I am worldly minded. I fear God, but yet more I fear the hell of poverty. To be destitute is the last depth of misfortune in society as now constituted. I am a man of my time, I respect money." "And you are right," said Adeline, "from the worldly point of view." She was 1,000 miles from her point, and she felt herself on a gridiron, like Saint Lawrence, as she thought of her uncle, for she could see him blowing his brains out. She looked down. Then she raised her eyes to gaze at Crevel with angelic sweetness, not with the inviting suggestiveness which was part of Valerie's wit. 3 years ago she could have bewitched Crevel by that beautiful look. "I have known the time," said she, "when you were more generous. you used to talk of 300,000 francs like a grand gentleman." Crevel looked at Madame Hulot. He beheld her like a lily in the last of its bloom. Vague sensations rose within him, but he felt such respect for this saintly creature that he spurned all suspicions and buried them in the most profligate corner of his heart. "I, madame, am still the same; but a retired merchant, if he is a grand gentleman, plays, and must play, the part with method and economy. He carries his ideas of order into everything. He opens an account for his little amusements, and devotes certain profits to that head of expenditure, but as to touching his capital, it would be folly. My children will have their fortune intact, mine and my wife's, but I do not suppose that they wish their father to be dull, a monk and a mummy. My life is a very jolly one. I float gaily down the stream. I fulfil all the duties imposed on me by law, by my affections, and by family ties, just as I always used to be punctual in paying my bills when they fell due. If only my children conduct themselves in their domestic life as I do, I shall be satisfied. And for the present, so long as my follies, for I have committed follies, are no loss to any one but the gulls, excuse me, you do not perhaps understand the slang word, they will have nothing to blame me for, and will find a tidy little sum still left when I die. Your children cannot say as much of their father, who is ruining his son and my daughter by his pranks." The Baroness was getting further from her object as he went on. "You are very unkind about my husband, my dear Crevel. And yet, if you had found his wife obliging, you would have been his best friend." She shot a burning glance at Crevel; but, like Dubois, who gave the Regent 3 kicks, she affected too much, and the rakish perfumer's thoughts jumped at such profligate suggestions, that he said to himself, "Does she want to turn the tables on Hulot? Does she think me more attractive as a mayor than as a National Guardsman? Women are strange creatures." And he assumed the position of his second manner, looking at the Baroness with his Regency leer. "I could almost fancy," she went on, "that you want to visit on him your resentment against the virtue that resisted you in a woman whom you loved well enough to buy her," she added in a low voice. "In a divine woman," Crevel replied with a meaning smile at the Baroness, who looked down while tears rose to her eyes. "For you have swallowed not a few bitter pills in these 3 years, eh, my beauty?" "Do not talk of my troubles, dear Crevel. They are too much for the endurance of a mere human being. Ah, if you still love me, you may drag me out of the pit in which I lie. Yes, I am in hell torment. The regicides who were racked and nipped and torn into quarters by 4 horses were on roses compared with me, for their bodies only were dismembered, and my heart is torn in quarters." Crevel's thumb moved from his armhole, he placed his hand on the work table, he abandoned his attitude, he smiled. The smile was so vacuous that it misled the Baroness. She took it for an expression of kindness. "You see a woman, not indeed in despair, but with her honor at the point of death, and prepared for everything, my dear friend, to hinder a crime." Fearing that Hortense might come in, she bolted the door. Then, with equal impetuosity, she fell at Crevel's feet, took his hand, and kissed it. "Be my deliverer!" she cried. She thought there was some generous fibre in this mercantile soul, and full of sudden hope that she might get the 200,000 francs without degrading herself. "Buy a soul! You were once ready to buy virtue," she went on with a frenzied gaze. "Trust to my honesty as a woman, to my honor, of which you know the worth. Be my friend. Save a whole family from ruin, shame, despair. Keep it from falling into a bog where the quicksands are mingled with blood. "Oh, ask for no explanations!" she exclaimed, at a movement on Crevel's part, who was about to speak. "Above all, do not say to me, 'I told you so,' like a friend who is glad at a misfortune. Come now, yield to her whom you used to love, to the woman whose humiliation at your feet is perhaps the crowning moment of her glory. Ask nothing of her, expect what you will from her gratitude. No, no, give me nothing, but lend to me whom you used to call Adeline." At this point her tears flowed so fast, Adeline was sobbing so passionately, that Crevel's gloves were wet. The words, "I need 200,000 francs," were scarcely articulate in the torrent of weeping, as stones, however large, are invisible in alpine cataracts swollen by the melting of the snows. This is the inexperience of virtue. Vice asks for nothing, as we have seen in Madame Marneffe; it gets everything offered to it. Women of that stamp are never exacting till they have made themselves indispensable, or when a man has to be worked as a quarry is worked where the lime is rather scarce, going to ruin, as the quarrymen say. On hearing these words, 200,000 francs, Crevel understood all. He cheerfully raised the Baroness, saying insolently, "Come, come, bear up, mother," which Adeline, in her distraction, failed to hear. The scene was changing its character. Crevel was becoming master of the situation, to use his own words. End of chapter 28. Chapter 29 of Cousin Betty by Honoré de Balzac. Translated by James Waring. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Bruce Peary. Chapter 29. The vastness of the sum startled Crevel so greatly that his emotion at seeing this handsome woman in tears at his feet was forgotten. Besides, however angelical and saintly a woman may be, when she is crying bitterly, her beauty disappears. A Madame Marneffe, as has been seen, whimpers now and then, a tear trickles down her cheek; but as to melting into tears and making her eyes and nose red, never would she commit such a blunder. "Come, child, compose yourself, deuce take it," Crevel went on, taking Madame Hulot's hands in his own and patting them. "Why do you apply to me for 200,000 francs? What do you want with them? Whom are they for?" "Do not," said she, "insist on any explanations. Give me the money. You will save 3 lives and the honor of our children." "And do you suppose, my good mother, that in all Paris you will find a man who, at a word from a half crazy woman, will go off hic et nunc, and bring out of some drawer, heaven knows where, 200,000 francs that have been lying simmering there till she is pleased to scoop them up? Is that all you know of life and of business, my beauty? Your folks are in a bad way; you may send them the last sacraments, for no one in Paris but Her Divine Highness Madame la Banque, or the great Nucingen, or some miserable miser who is in love with gold as we other folks are with a woman, could produce such a miracle. The civil list, civil as it may be, would beg you to call again to morrow. Every one invests his money and turns it over to the best of his powers. You are quite mistaken, my angel, if you suppose that King Louis Philippe rules us. He himself knows better than that. He knows as well as we do that supreme above the Charter reigns the holy, venerated, substantial, delightful, obliging, beautiful, noble, ever youthful, and all powerful 5-franc piece. But money, my beauty, insists on interest, and is always engaged in seeking it. God of the Jews, thou art supreme, says Racine. The perennial parable of the golden calf, you see. In the days of Moses there was stock jobbing in the desert. We have reverted to biblical traditions. The golden calf was the first state ledger, he went on. You, my Adeline, have not gone beyond the Rue Plumet. The Egyptians had lent enormous sums to the Hebrews, and what they ran after was not God's people, but their capital." He looked at the Baroness with an expression which said, "How clever I am!" "You know nothing of the devotion of every city man to his sacred hoard," he went on after a pause. "Excuse me, listen to me. Get this well into your head. You want 200,000 francs? No one can produce the sum without selling some security. Now consider. To have 200,000 francs in hard cash, it would be needful to sell about 700,000 francs worth of stock at 3%. Well, and then you would only get the money on the third day. That is the quickest way. To persuade a man to part with a fortune, for 200,000 francs is the whole fortune of many a man, he ought at least to know where it is all going to, and for what purpose." "It is going, my dear, kind Crevel, to save the lives of two men, one of whom will die of grief and the other will kill himself, and to save me too from going mad. Am I not a little mad already?" "Not so mad," said he, taking Madame Hulot round the knees. "Old Crevel has his price, since you thought of applying to him, my angel." "They submit to have a man's arms round their knees, it would seem," thought the saintly woman, covering her face with her hands. "Once you offered me a fortune," said she, turning red. "Ay, mother, but that was 3 years ago," replied Crevel. "Well, you are handsomer now than ever I saw you," he went on, taking the Baroness' arm and pressing it to his heart. "You have a good memory, my dear, by Jove! And now you see how wrong you were to be so prudish, for those 300,000 francs that you refused so magnanimously are in another woman's pocket. I loved you then, I love you still, but just look back these 3 years. When I said to you, 'You shall be mine,' what object had I in view? I meant to be revenged on that rascal Hulot. But your husband, my beauty, found himself a mistress, a jewel of a woman, a pearl, a cunning hussy then aged 23, for she is 26 now. It struck me as more amusing, more complete, more Louis XV, more Marechal de Richelieu, more first class altogether, to filch away that charmer, who, in point of fact, never cared for Hulot, and who for these 3 years has been madly in love with your humble servant." As he spoke, Crevel, from whose hands the Baroness had released her own, had resumed his favorite attitude. Both thumbs were stuck into his armholes, and he was patting his ribs with his fingers like two flapping wings, fancying that he was thus making himself very attractive and charming. It was as much as to say, "And this is the man you would have nothing to say to." "There you are, my dear. I had my revenge, and your husband knows it. I proved to him clearly that he was basketed, just where he was before, as we say. Madame Marneffe is my mistress, and when her precious Marneffe kicks the bucket, she will be my wife." Madame Hulot stared at Crevel with a fixed and almost dazed look. "Hector knew it?" she said. "And went back to her," replied Crevel, "and I allowed it, because Valerie wished to be the wife of a head clerk; but she promised me that she would manage things so that our Baron should be so effectually bowled over that he can never interfere any more. And my little Duchess, for that woman is a born Duchess, on my soul, kept her word. She restores you your Hector, madame, virtuous in perpetuity, as she says. She is so witty. He has had a good lesson, I can tell you. The Baron has had some hard knocks. He will help no more actresses or fine ladies. He is radically cured, cleaned out like a beer glass. If you had listened to Crevel in the first instance, instead of scorning him and turning him out of the house, you might have had 400,000 francs, for my revenge has cost me all of that. But I shall get my change back, I hope, when Marneffe dies. I have invested in a wife, you see, That is the secret of my extravagance. I have solved the problem of playing the lord on easy terms." "Would you give your daughter such a mother in law?" cried Madame Hulot. "You do not know Valerie, madame," replied Crevel gravely, striking the attitude of his first manner. "She is a woman with good blood in her veins, a lady, and a woman who enjoys the highest consideration. Why, only yesterday the vicar of the parish was dining with her. She is pious, and we have presented a splendid monstrance to the church. Oh, she is clever, she is witty, she is delightful, well informed, she has everything in her favor. For my part, my dear Adeline, I owe everything to that charming woman. She has opened my mind, polished my speech, as you may have noticed. She corrects my impetuosity, and gives me words and ideas. I never say anything now that I ought not. I have greatly improved; you must have noticed it. And then she has encouraged my ambition. I shall be a deputy, and I shall make no blunders, for I shall consult my Egeria. Every great politician, from Numa to our present Prime Minister, has had his Sibyl of the Fountain. A score of deputies visit Valerie; she is acquiring considerable influence, and now that she is about to be established in a charming house with a carriage, she will be one of the occult rulers of Paris. A fine locomotive! That is what such a woman is. Oh, I have blessed you many a time for your stern virtue." "It is enough to make one doubt the goodness of God," cried Adeline, whose indignation had dried her tears. "But no, divine justice must be hanging over her head." "You know nothing of the world, my beauty," said the great politician, deeply offended. "The world, my Adeline, loves success. Say, now, has it come to seek out your sublime virtue, priced at 200,000 francs?" The words made Madame Hulot shudder. The nervous trembling attacked her once more. She saw that the ex perfumer was taking a mean revenge on her as he had on Hulot. She felt sick with disgust, and a spasm rose to her throat, hindering speech. "Money," she said at last, "always money." "You touched me deeply," said Crevel, reminded by these words of the woman's humiliation. "When I beheld you there, weeping at my feet, you perhaps will not believe me, but if I had my pocketbook about me, it would have been yours. Come, do you really want such a sum?" As she heard this question, big with 200,000 francs, Adeline forgot the odious insults heaped on her by this cheap jack fine gentleman before the tempting picture of success described by Machiavelli Crevel, who only wanted to find out her secrets and laugh over them with Valerie. "Oh, I will do anything, everything!" cried the unhappy woman. "Monsieur, I will sell myself. I will be a Valerie if I must." "You will find that difficult," replied Crevel. "Valerie is a masterpiece in her way. My good mother, 25 years of virtue are always repellent, like a badly treated disease, and your virtue has grown very mouldy, my dear child. But you shall see how much I love you. I will manage to get you your 200,000 francs." Adeline, incapable of uttering a word, seized his hand and laid it on her heart. A tear of joy trembled in her eyes. "Oh, don't be in a hurry; there will be some hard pulling. I am a jolly good fellow, a good soul with no prejudices, and I will put things plainly to you. You want to do as Valerie does. Very good. But that is not all. You must have a gull, a stockholder, an Hulot. Well, I know a retired tradesman, in fact, a hosier. He is heavy, dull, has not an idea. I am licking him into shape, but I don't know when he will do me credit. My man is a deputy, stupid and conceited. The tyranny of a turbaned wife in the depths of the country has preserved him in a state of utter virginity as to the luxury and pleasures of Paris life. But Beauvisage, his name is Beauvisage, is a millionaire, and, like me, my dear, 3 years ago, he will give 100,000 crowns to be the lover of a real lady. Yes, you see," he went on, misunderstanding a gesture on Adeline's part, "he is jealous of me, you understand, jealous of my happiness with Madame Marneffe, and he is a fellow quite capable of selling an estate to purchase a—" "Enough, Monsieur Crevel," said Madame Hulot, no longer controlling her disgust and showing all her shame in her face. "I am punished beyond my deserts. My conscience, so sternly repressed by the iron hand of necessity, tells me at this final insult that such sacrifices are impossible. My pride is gone. I do not say now, as I did the first time, 'Go,' after receiving this mortal thrust. I have lost the right to do so. I have flung myself before you like a prostitute. Yes," she went on, in reply to a negative on Crevel's part, "I have fouled my life, till now so pure, by a degrading thought, and I am inexcusable. I know it. I deserve every insult you can offer me. God's will be done. If indeed He desires the death of two creatures worthy to appear before Him, they must die. I shall mourn them and pray for them. If it is His will that my family should be humbled to the dust, we must bow to His avenging sword, nay, and kiss it, since we are Christians. I know how to expiate this disgrace, which will be the torment of all my remaining days. I who speak to you, monsieur, am not Madame Hulot, but a wretched, humble sinner, a Christian whose heart henceforth will know but one feeling, and that is repentance. All my time given up to prayer and charity. With such a sin on my soul, I am the last of women, the first only of penitents. You have been the means of bringing me to a right mind. I can hear the voice of God speaking within me, and I can thank you." She was shaking with the nervous trembling which from that hour never left her. Her low, sweet tones were quite unlike the fevered accents of the woman who was ready for dishonor to save her family. The blood faded from her cheeks, her face was colorless, and her eyes were dry. "And I played my part very badly, did I not?" she went on, looking at Crevel with the sweetness that martyrs must have shown in their eyes as they looked up at the proconsul. "True love, the sacred love of a devoted woman, gives other pleasures, no doubt, than those that are bought in the open market. But why so many words?" said she, suddenly bethinking herself, and advancing a step further in the way to perfection. "They sound like irony, but I am not ironical. Forgive me. Besides, monsieur, I did not want to hurt any one but myself." The dignity of virtue and its holy flame had expelled the transient impurity of the woman who, splendid in her own peculiar beauty, looked taller in Crevel's eyes. Adeline had, at this moment, the majesty of the figures of religion clinging to the cross, as painted by the old Venetians; but she expressed, too, the immensity of her love and the grandeur of the Catholic Church, to which she flew like a wounded dove. Crevel was dazzled, astounded. "Madame, I am your slave without conditions," said he in an inspiration of generosity. "We will look into this matter, and whatever you want, the impossible even, I will do. I will pledge my securities at the bank, and in 2 hours you shall have the money." "Good God, a miracle!" said poor Adeline, falling on her knees. She prayed to Heaven with such fervor as touched Crevel deeply. Madame Hulot saw that he had tears in his eyes when, having ended her prayer, she rose to her feet. "Be a friend to me, monsieur," said she. "Your heart is better than your words and conduct. God gave you your soul. Your passions and the world have given you your ideas. Oh, I will love you truly!" she exclaimed, with an angelic tenderness in strange contrast with her attempts at coquettish trickery. "But cease to tremble so," said Crevel. "Am I trembling? said the Baroness, unconscious of the infirmity that had so suddenly come upon her. "Yes, why, look," said Crevel, taking Adeline by the arm and showing her that she was shaking with nervousness. "Come, madame," he added respectfully, "compose yourself. I am going to the bank at once." "And come back quickly. Remember," she added, betraying all her secrets, "that the first point is to prevent the suicide of our poor Uncle Fischer involved by my husband, for I trust you now, and I am telling you everything. Oh, if we should not be on time! I know my brother in law, the Marshal, and he has such a delicate soul, that he would die of it in a few days." "I am off then," said Crevel, kissing the Baroness' hand. "But what has that unhappy Hulot done?" "He has swindled the Government." "Good heavens! I fly, madame, I understand. I admire you." Crevel bent one knee, kissed Madame Hulot's skirt, and vanished, saying, "You will see me soon." Unluckily, on his way from the Rue Plumet to his own house to fetch the securities, Crevel went along the Rue Vanneau, and he could not resist going in to see his little Duchess. His face still bore an agitated expression. He went straight into Valerie's room, who was having her hair dressed. She looked at Crevel in her glass, and, like every woman of that sort, was annoyed, before she knew anything about it, to see that he was moved by some strong feeling of which she was not the cause. "What is the matter, my dear?" said she. "Is that a face to bring into your little Duchess? I will not be your Duchess any more, monsieur, no more than I will be your little duck, you old monster." Crevel replied by a melancholy smile and a glance at the maid. "Reine, child, that will do for to day. I can finish my hair myself. Give me my Chinese wrapper. My gentleman seems to me out of sorts." Reine, whose face was pitted like a colander, and who seemed to have been made on purpose to wait on Valerie, smiled meaningly in reply, and brought the dressing gown. Valerie took off her combing wrapper; she was in her shift, and she wriggled into the dressing gown like a snake into a clump of grass. "Madame is not at home?" "What a question!" said Valerie. "Come, tell me, my big puss, have Rive Gauche gone down?" "No." "They have raised the price of the house?" "No." "You fancy that you are not the father of our little Crevel?" "What nonsense!" replied he, sure of his paternity. "On my honor, I give it up," said Madame Marneffe. "If I am expected to extract my friend's woes as you pull the cork out of a bottle of Bordeaux, I let it alone. Go away, you bore me." "It is nothing," said Crevel. "I must find 200,000 francs in 2 hours." "Oh, you can easily get them. I have not spent the 50,000 francs we got out of Hulot for that report, and I can ask Henri for 50,000." "Henri! It is always Henri!" exclaimed Crevel. "And do you suppose, you great baby of a Machiavelli, that I will cast off Henri? Would France disarm her fleet? Henri, why, he is a dagger in a sheath hanging on a nail. That boy serves as a weather glass to show me if you love me. And you don't love me this morning." "I don't love you, Valerie," cried Crevel. "I love you as much as a million." "That is not nearly enough," cried she, jumping on to Crevel's knee and throwing both arms round his neck as if it were a peg to hang on by. "I want to be loved as much as 10 millions, as much as all the gold in the world, and more to that. Henri would never wait a minute before telling me all he had on his mind. What is it, my great pet? Have it out. Make a clean breast of it to your own little duck." And she swept her hair over Crevel's face while she jestingly pulled his nose. "Can a man with a nose like that," she went on, "have any secrets from his vava, lele, riri?" And at the vava she tweaked his nose to the right, at lele it went to the left, at riri she nipped it straight again. "Well, I have just seen." Crevel stopped and looked at Madame Marneffe. "Valerie, my treasure, promise me on your honor, ours, you know, not to repeat a single word of what I tell you." "Of course, Mayor, we know all about that. One hand up, so, and one foot, so." And she put herself in an attitude which, to use Rabelais' phrase, stripped Crevel bare from his brain to his heels, so quaint and delicious was the nudity revealed through the light film of lawn. "I have just seen virtue in despair." "Can despair possess virtue?" said she, nodding gravely and crossing her arms like Napoleon. "It is poor Madame Hulot. She wants 200,000 francs, or else Marshal Hulot and old Johann Fischer will blow their brains out. And as you, my little Duchess, are partly at the bottom of the mischief, I am going to patch matters up. She is a saintly creature, I know her well. She will repay you every penny." At the name of Hulot, at the words 200,000 francs, a gleam from Valerie's eyes flashed from between her long eyelids like the flame of a cannon through the smoke. "What did the old thing do to move you to compassion? Did she show you what? Her religion? Do not make game of her, sweetheart. She is a very saintly, a very noble and pious woman, worthy of all respect." "Am I not worthy of respect then, eh?" answered Valerie, with a threatening gaze at Crevel. "I never said so," replied he, understanding that the praise of virtue might not be gratifying to Madame Marneffe. "I am pious too," Valerie went on, taking her seat in an armchair, "but I do not make a trade of my religion. I go to church in secret." She sat in silence and paid no further heed to Crevel. He, extremely ill at ease, came to stand in front of the chair into which Valerie had thrown herself, and saw her lost in the reflections he had been so foolish as to suggest. "Valerie, my little angel." Utter silence. A highly problematical tear was furtively dashed away. "One word, my little duck." "Monsieur." "What are you thinking of, my darling?" "Oh, Monsieur Crevel, I was thinking of the day of my first communion. How pretty I was! How pure, how saintly, immaculate! Oh, if any one had come to my mother and said, 'Your daughter will be a hussy, and unfaithful to her husband. One day a police officer will find her in a disreputable house. She will sell herself to a Crevel, to cheat an Hulot, to horrible old men.' Pouf! Horrible! She would have died before the end of the sentence. She was so fond of me, poor dear." "Nay, be calm." "You cannot think how well a woman must love a man before she can silence the remorse that gnaws at the heart of an adulterous wife. I am quite sorry that Reine is not here; she would have told you that she found me this morning praying with tears in my eyes. I, Monsieur Crevel, for my part, do not make a mockery of religion. Have you ever heard me say a word I ought not on such a subject?" Crevel shook his head in negation. "I will never allow it to be mentioned in my presence. I can make fun of anything under the sun: kings, politics, finance, everything that is sacred in the eyes of the world, judges, matrimony, and love, old men and maidens; but the Church and God, there I draw the line. I know I am wicked. I am sacrificing my future life to you, and you have no conception of the immensity of my love." Crevel clasped his hands. "No, unless you could see into my heart and fathom the depth of my conviction so as to know the extent of my sacrifice. I feel in me the making of a Magdalen. And see how respectfully I treat the priests. Think of the gifts I make to the Church. My mother brought me up in the Catholic faith, and I know what is meant by God. It is to sinners like us that His voice is most awful." Valerie wiped away 2 tears that trickled down her cheeks. Crevel was in dismay. Madame Marneffe stood up in her excitement. "Be calm, my darling, you alarm me." Madame Marneffe fell on her knees. "Dear Heaven, I am not bad all through," she cried, clasping her hands. Vouchsafe to rescue thy wandering lamb. Strike her, crush her, snatch her from foul and adulterous hands, and how gladly she will nestle on thy shoulder, how willingly she will return to the fold." She got up and looked at Crevel. Her colorless eyes frightened him. "Yes, Crevel, and do you know, I too am frightened sometimes. The justice of God is exerted in this nether world as well as in the next. What mercy can I expect at God's hands? His vengeance overtakes the guilty in many ways; it assumes every aspect of disaster. That is what my mother told me on her deathbed, speaking of her own old age. But if I should lose you," she added, hugging Crevel with a sort of savage frenzy, "oh, I should die!" Madame Marneffe released Crevel, knelt down again at the armchair, folded her hands and in what a bewitching attitude! And with incredible fervor poured out the following prayer: "And thou, Saint Valerie, my patron saint, why dost thou so rarely visit the pillow of her who was entrusted to thy care? Oh, come this evening, as thou didst this morning, to inspire me with holy thoughts, and I will quit the path of sin. Like the Magdalen, I will give up deluding joys and the false glitter of the world, even the man I love so well. My precious duck! No more of the precious duck, monsieur," said she, turning round like a virtuous wife, her eyes full of tears, but dignified, cold, and indifferent. "Leave me," she went on, pushing him from her. "What is my duty? To belong wholly to my husband. He is a dying man, and what am I doing? Deceiving him on the edge of the grave. He believes your child to be his. I will tell him the truth, and begin by securing his pardon before I ask for God's. We must part. Good bye, Monsieur Crevel," and she stood up to offer him an icy cold hand. "Good bye, my friend. We shall meet no more till we meet in a better world. You have to thank me for some enjoyment, criminal indeed. Now I want, oh yes, I shall have your esteem." Crevel was weeping bitter tears. "You great pumpkin!" she exclaimed with an infernal peal of laughter. "That is how your pious women go about it to drag from you a plum of 200,000 francs! And you, who talk of the Marechal de Richelieu, the prototype of Lovelace, you could be taken in by such a stale trick as that! I could get hundreds of thousands of francs out of you any day if I chose, you old ninny! Keep your money. If you have more than you know what to do with, it is mine. If you give 2 sous to that respectable woman, who is pious forsooth because she is 56 years of age, we shall never meet again, and you may take her for your mistress. You could come back to me next day bruised all over from her bony caresses, and sodden with her tears, and sick of her little barmaid's caps and her whimpering, which must turn her favors into showers." "In point of fact," said Crevel, 200,000 francs is a round sum of money." "They have fine appetites, have the goody sort. By the poker! They sell their sermons dearer than we sell the rarest and realest thing on earth pleasure. And they can spin a yarn. There, I know them. I have seen plenty in my mother's house. They think everything is allowable for the Church and for Really, my dear love, you ought to be ashamed of yourself, for you are not so open handed. You have not given me 200,000 francs all told." "Oh yes," said Crevel, "your little house will cost as much as that." "Then you have 400,000 francs?" said she thoughtfully. "No." "Then, sir, you meant to lend that old horror the 200,000 francs due for my hotel? What a crime! What high treason!" "Only listen to me. If you were giving the money to some idiotic philanthropic scheme, you would be regarded as a coming man," she went on with increasing eagerness, "and I should be the first to advise it. for you are too simple to write a big political book that might make you famous. As for style, you have not enough to butter a pamphlet; but you might do as other men do who are in your predicament, and who get a halo of glory about their name by putting it at the top of some social or moral or general or national enterprise. Benevolence is out of date, quite vulgar. Providing for old offenders and making them more comfortable than the poor devils who are honest is played out. What I should like to see is some invention of your own with an endowment of 200,000 francs, something difficult and really useful. Then you would be talked about as a man of mark, a Montyon, and I should be very proud of you. But as to throwing 200,000 francs into a holy water shell, or lending them to a bigot cast off by her husband, and who knows why? There is always some reason. Does anyone cast me off, I ask you? Is a piece of idiocy, which in our days could only come into the head of a retired perfumer. It reeks of the counter. You would not dare look at yourself in the glass 2 days after. Go and pay the money in where it will be safe. Run, fly. I will not admit you again without the receipt in your hand. Go, as fast and soon as you can." She pushed Crevel out of the room by the shoulders, seeing avarice blossoming in his face once more. When she heard the outer door shut, she exclaimed: "Then Lisbeth is revenged over and over again. What a pity that she is at her old Marshal's now! We would have had a good laugh. So that old woman wants to take the bread out of my mouth. I will startle her a little." End of chapter 29. Chapter 30 of Cousin Betty by Honoré de Balzac, translated by James Waring. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Bruce Peary. Chapter 30. Marshal Hulot, being obliged to live in a style suited to the highest military rank, had taken a handsome house in the Rue du Montparnasse, where there are 3 or 4 princely residences. Though he rented the whole house, he inhabited only the ground floor. When Lisbeth went to keep house for him, she at once wished to let the first floor, which, as she said, would pay the whole rent, so that the Count would live almost rent-free, but the old soldier would not hear of it. For some months past the Marshal had had many sad thoughts. He had guessed how miserably poor his sister-in-law was, and suspected her griefs without understanding their cause. The old man, so cheerful in his deafness, became taciturn. He could not help thinking that his house would one day be a refuge for the Baroness and her daughter, and it was for them that he kept the first floor. The smallness of his fortune was so well known at headquarters that the War Minister, the Prince de Wissembourg, begged his old comrade to accept a sum of money for his household expenses. This sum the Marshal spent in furnishing the ground floor, which was in every way suitable; for, as he said, he would not accept the Marshal's baton to walk the streets with. The house had belonged to a senator under the Empire, and the ground floor drawing rooms had been very magnificently fitted with carved wood, white and gold, still in very good preservation. The Marshal had found some good old furniture in the same style. In the coach house he had a carriage with 2 batons in saltire on the panels, and when he was expected to appear in full fig at the Minister's, at the Tuileries, for some ceremony or high festival, he hired horses for the job. His servant for more than 30 years was an old soldier of 60, whose sister was the cook, so he had saved 10,000 francs, adding it by degrees to a little hoard he intended for Hortense. Every day the old man walked along the boulevard from the Rue de Montparnasse to the Rue Plumet, and every pensioner, as he passed, stood at attention, without fail, to salute him. Then the Marshal rewarded the veteran with a smile. "Who is the man you always stand at attention to salute?" said a young workman one day to an old captain and pensioner. "I will tell you, boy," replied the officer. The boy stood resigned, as a man does to listen to an old gossip. "In 1809," said the captain, "we were covering the flank of the main army, marching on Vienna under the Emperor's command. We came to a bridge defended by 3 batteries of cannon, one above another, on a sort of cliff, 3 redoubts like 3 shelves, and commanding the bridge. We were under Marshal Massena. That man whom you see there was colonel of the Grenadier Guards, and I was one of them. Our columns held one bank of the river, the batteries were on the other. 3 times they tried for the bridge, and 3 times they were driven back. 'Go and find Hulot,' said the Marshal. 'Nobody but he and his men can bolt that morsel.' So we came. The General, who was just retiring from the bridge, stopped Hulot under fire to tell him how to do it, and he was in the way. 'I don't want advice, but room to pass,' said our General coolly, marching across at the head of his men. And then rattle 30 guns raking us at once." "By heaven!" cried the workman, "that accounts for some of these crutches. And if you, like me, my boy, had heard those words so quietly spoken, you would bow before that man down to the ground. It is not so famous as Arcole, but perhaps it was finer. We followed Hulot at the double, right up to those batteries. All honor to those we left there." And the old man lifted his hat. "The Austrians were amazed at the dash of it. The Emperor made the man you saw a count; he honored us all by honoring our leader, and the King of to-day was very right to make him a Marshal." "Hurrah for the Marshal!" cried the workman. "Oh, you may shout, shout away; the Marshal is as deaf as a post from the roar of cannon." This anecdote may give some idea of the respect with which the Invalides regarded Marshal Hulot, whose republican proclivities secured him the popular sympathy of the whole quarter of the town. Sorrow taking hold on a spirit so calm and strict and noble was a heart-breaking spectacle. The Baroness could only tell lies, with a woman's ingenuity, to conceal the whole dreadful truth from her brother-in-law. In the course of this miserable morning, the Marshal, who, like all old men, slept but little, had extracted from Lisbeth full particulars as to his brother's situation, promising to marry her as the reward of her revelations. Any one can imagine with what glee the old maid allowed the secrets to be dragged from her, which she had been dying to tell ever since she had come into the house; for by this means she made her marriage more certain. "Your brother is incorrigible," Lisbeth shouted into the Marshal's best ear. Her strong, clear tones enabled her to talk to him, but she wore out her lungs, so anxious was she to prove to her future husband that to her he would never be deaf. "He has had 3 mistresses," said the old man, "and his wife was an Adeline. Poor Adeline!" "If you will take my advice," shrieked Lisbeth, "you will use your influence with the Prince de Wissembourg to secure her some suitable appointment. She will need it, for the Baron's pay is pledged for 3 years." "I will go to the War Office," said he, "and see the Prince, to find out what he thinks of my brother, and ask for his interest to help my sister. Think of some place that is fit for her." The charitable ladies of Paris, in concert with the Archbishop, have formed various beneficent associations. They employ superintendents, very decently paid, whose business it is to seek out cases of real want. Such an occupation would exactly suit dear Adeline; it would be work after her own heart. "Send to order the horses," said the Marshal. "I will go and dress. I will drive to Neuilly if necessary." "How fond he is of her! She will always cross my path wherever I turn," said Lisbeth to herself. Lisbeth was already supreme in the house, but not with the Marshal's cognizance. She had struck terror into the 3 servants, for she had allowed herself a housemaid, and she exerted her old maidish energy in taking stock of everything, examining everything, and arranging in every respect for the comfort of her dear Marshal. Lisbeth, quite as republican as he could be, pleased him by her democratic opinions, and she flattered him with amazing dexterity. For the last fortnight, the old man, whose house was better kept and who was cared for as a child by its mother, had begun to regard Lisbeth as a part of what he had dreamed of. "My dear Marshal," she shouted, following him out on to the steps, "pull up the windows, do not sit in a draught, to oblige me." The Marshal, who had never been so cosseted in his life, went off smiling at Lisbeth, though his heart was aching. At the same hour, Baron Hulot was quitting the War Office to call on his chief, Marshal the Prince de Wissembourg, who had sent for him. Though there was nothing extraordinary in one of the generals on the board being sent for, Hulot's conscience was so uneasy that he fancied he saw a cold and sinister expression in Mitouflet's face. "Mitouflet, how is the Prince?" he asked, locking the door of his private room and following the messenger who led the way. "He must have a crow to pluck with you, Monsieur le Baron," replied the man, "for his face is set at stormy." Hulot turned pale and said no more. He crossed the anteroom and reception rooms, and with a violently beating heart found himself at the door of the Prince's private study. The chief, at this time 70 years old, with perfectly white hair and the tanned complexion of a soldier of that age, commanded attention by a brow so vast that imagination saw in it a field of battle. Under this dome, crowned with snow, sparkled a pair of eyes of the Napoleon blue, usually sad-looking and full of bitter thoughts and regrets, their fire overshadowed by the penthouse of the strongly projecting brow. This man, Bernadotte's rival, had hoped to find his seat on a throne, but those eyes could flash formidable lightnings when they expressed strong feelings. Then his voice, always somewhat hollow, rang with strident tones. When he was angry, the Prince was a soldier once more. He spoke the language of Lieutenant Cotin; he spared nothing, nobody. Hulot d'Ervy found the old lion, his hair shaggy like a mane, standing by the fireplace, his brows knit, his back against the mantel shelf, and his eyes apparently fixed on vacancy. "Here, at your orders, Prince," said Hulot, affecting a graceful ease of manner. The Marshal looked hard at the Baron, without saying a word, during the time it took him to come from the door to within a few steps of where the chief stood. This leaden stare was like the eye of God. Hulot could not meet it; he looked down in confusion. "He knows everything," said he to himself. "Does your conscience tell you nothing?" asked the Marshal, in his deep, hollow tones. "It tells me, sir, that I have been wrong, no doubt, in ordering razzias in Algeria without referring the matter to you. At my age and with my tastes, after 45 years of service, I have no fortune. You know the principles of the 400 elect representatives of France. Those gentlemen are envious of every distinction. They have pared down even the minister's pay. That says everything. Ask them for money for an old servant. What can you expect of men who pay a whole class so badly as they pay the government legal officials? Who give 30 sous a day to the labourers on the works at Toulon, when it is a physical impossibility to live there and keep a family on less than 40 sous? Who never think of the atrocity of giving salaries of 600 francs, up to 1,000 or 1,200 perhaps, to clerks living in Paris, and who want to secure our places for themselves as soon as the pay rises to 40,000; who, finally, refuse to restore to the Crown a piece of Crown property confiscated from the Crown in 1830, property acquired, too, by Louis XVI out of his privy purse. If you had no private fortune, Prince, you would be left high and dry, like my brother, with your pay and not another sou, and no thought of your having saved the army, and me with it, in the boggy plains of Poland. You have robbed the State. You have made yourself liable to be brought before the bench at assizes," said the Marshal, "like that clerk of the Treasury, and you take this, monsieur, with such levity." "But there is a great difference, monseigneur," cried the Baron. "Have I dipped my hands into a cash box entrusted to my care?" "When a man of your rank commits such an infamous crime," said the Marshal, "he is doubly guilty if he does it clumsily. You have compromised the honor of our official administration, which hitherto has been the purest in Europe. And all for 200,000 francs and a hussy," said the Marshal in a terrible voice. "You are a Councillor of State, and a private soldier who sells anything belonging to his regiment is punished with death. Here is a story told to me one day by Colonel Pourin of the 2nd Lancers. At Saverne, one of his men fell in love with a little Alsatian girl who had a fancy for a shawl. The jade teased this poor devil of a lancer so effectually that though he could show 20 years' service, and was about to be promoted to be quartermaster, the pride of the regiment, to buy this shawl he sold some of his company's kit. Do you know what this lancer did, Baron d'Ervy? He swallowed some window glass after pounding it down, and died in 11 hours of an illness in hospital. Try, if you please, to die of apoplexy, that we may not see you dishonored." Hulot looked with haggard eyes at the old warrior, and the Prince, reading the look which betrayed the coward, felt a flush rise to his cheeks, his eyes flamed. "Will you, sir, abandon me?" Hulot stammered. Marshal Hulot, hearing that only his brother was with the Minister, ventured at this juncture to come in, and, like all deaf people, went straight up to the Prince. "Oh," cried the hero of Poland, "I know what you are here for, my old friend, but we can do nothing." "Do nothing?" echoed Marshal Hulot, who had heard only the last word. "Nothing. You have come to intercede for your brother. But do you know what your brother is?" "My brother?" asked the deaf man. "Yes, he is a damned infernal blackguard, and unworthy of you." The Marshal in his rage shot from his eyes those fulminating fires which, like Napoleon's, broke a man's will and judgment. "You lie, Cottin," said Marshal Hulot, turning white. "Throw down your baton as I throw mine. I am ready." The Prince went up to his old comrade, looked him in the face, and shouted in his ear as he grasped his hand: "Are you a man?" "You will see that I am." "Well, then, pull yourself together. You must face the worst misfortune that can befall you." The Prince turned round, took some papers from the table, and placed them in the Marshal's hands, saying, "Read that." The Comte de Forzheim read the following letter, which lay uppermost: "To His Excellency the President of the Council, private and confidential, Algiers. My dear Prince, we have a very ugly business on our hands, as you will see by the accompanying documents. The story, briefly told, is this: Baron Hulot d'Ervy sent out to the province of Oran an uncle of his as a broker in grain and forage, and gave him an accomplice in the person of a storekeeper. This storekeeper, to curry favor, has made a confession, and finally made his escape. The public prosecutor took the matter up very thoroughly, seeing, as he supposed, that only 2 inferior agents were implicated. But Johann Fischer, uncle to your chief of the commissariat department, finding that he was to be brought up at the assizes, stabbed himself in prison with a nail. That would have been the end of the matter if this worthy and honest man, deceived, it would seem, by his agent and by his nephew, had not thought proper to write to Baron Hulot. This letter, seized as a document, so greatly surprised the public prosecutor that he came to see me. Now, the arrest and public trial of a Councillor of State would be such a terrible thing, of a man high in office too, who has a good record for loyal service, for after the Beresina it was he who saved us all by reorganizing the administration, that I desired to have all the papers sent to me. Is the matter to take its course? Now that the principal agent is dead, will it not be better to smother up the affair and sentence the storekeeper in default? The public prosecutor has consented to my forwarding the documents for your perusal. The Baron Hulot d'Ervy being resident in Paris, the proceedings will lie with your Supreme Court. We have hit on this rather shabby way of ridding ourselves of the difficulty for the moment. Only, my dear Marshal, decide quickly. This miserable business is too much talked about already, and it will do as much harm to us as to you all if the name of the principal culprit, known at present only to the public prosecutor, the examining judge, and myself, should happen to leak out." At this point the letter fell from Marshal Hulot's hands. He looked at his brother. He saw that there was no need to examine the evidence. But he looked for Johann Fischer's letter, and after reading it at a glance, held it out to Hector. From the prison at Oran. Dear nephew, when you read this letter, I shall have ceased to live. Be quite easy, no proof can be found to incriminate you. When I am dead and your Jesuit of a Chardin fled, the trial must collapse. The face of our Adeline, made so happy by you, makes death easy to me. Now you need not send the 200,000 francs. Goodbye. This letter will be delivered by a prisoner for a short term, whom I can trust, I believe. Johann Fischer. "I beg your pardon," said Marshal Hulot to the Prince de Wissembourg with pathetic pride. "Come, come, say tu, not the formal vous," replied the Minister, clasping his old friend's hand. "The poor lancer killed no one but himself," he added, with a thunderous look at Hulot d'Ervy. "How much have you had?" said the Comte de Forzheim to his brother. 200,000 francs. "My dear friend," said the Count, addressing the Minister, "you shall have the 200,000 francs within 48 hours. It shall never be said that a man bearing the name of Hulot has wronged the public treasury of a single sou." "What nonsense!" said the Prince. "I know where the money is, and I can get it back. Send in your resignation and ask for your pension," he went on, sending a double sheet of foolscap flying across to where the Councillor of State had sat down by the table, for his legs gave way under him. "To bring you to trial would disgrace us all. I have already obtained from the Superior Board their sanction to this line of action. Since you can accept life with dishonor, in my opinion the last degradation, you will get the pension you have earned, only take care to be forgotten." The Minister rang. "Is Marneffe, the head clerk, out there?" "Yes, monseigneur." "Show him in." "You," said the Minister as Marneffe came in, "you and your wife have wittingly and intentionally ruined the Baron d'Ervy, whom you see." "Monsieur le Ministre, I beg your pardon. We are very poor. I have nothing to live on but my pay, and I have 2 children, and the one that is coming will have been brought into the family by Monsieur le Baron." "What a villain he looks!" said the Prince, pointing to Marneffe and addressing Marshal Hulot. "No more of Sganarelle's speeches," he went on. "You will disgorge 200,000 francs or be packed off to Algiers." "But, Monsieur le Ministre, you do not know my wife. She has spent it all. Monsieur le Baron asked 6 persons to dinner every evening. 50,000 francs a year are spent in my house." "Leave the room," said the Minister, in the formidable tones that had given the word to charge in battle. "You will have notice of your transfer within 2 hours. Go." "I prefer to send in my resignation," said Marneffe insolently, "for it is too much to be what I am already, and thrashed into the bargain. That would not satisfy me at all." And he left the room. "What an impudent scoundrel!" said the Prince. Marshal Hulot, who had stood up throughout this scene, as pale as a corpse, studying his brother out of the corner of his eye, went up to the Prince and took his hand, repeating, "In 48 hours the pecuniary mischief shall be repaired, but honor Good bye, Marshal. It is the last shot that kills. Yes, I shall die of it," he said in his ear. "What the devil brought you here this morning?" said the Prince, much moved. "I came to see what can be done for his wife," replied the Count, pointing to his brother. "She is wanting bread, especially now." "He has his pension." "It is pledged." "The devil must possess such a man," said the Prince with a shrug. "What philtre do those baggages give you to rob you of your wits?" he went on to Hulot d'Ervy. "How could you who know the precise details with which in French offices everything is written down at full length, consuming reams of paper to certify to the receipt or outlay of a few centimes, you who have so often complained that 100 signatures are needed for a mere trifle, to discharge a soldier, to buy a currycomb, how could you hope to conceal a theft for any length of time? To say nothing of the newspapers, and the envious, and the people who would like to steal. Those women must rob you of your common sense. Do they cover your eyes with walnut shells? Or are you yourself made of different stuff from us? You ought to have left the office as soon as you found that you were no longer a man, but a temperament. If you have complicated your crime with such gross folly, you will end I will not say where." "Promise me, Cottin, that you will do what you can for her," said the Marshal, who heard nothing, and was still thinking of his sister in law. "Depend on me," said the Minister. "Thank you, and good bye then. Come, monsieur," he said to his brother. The Prince looked with apparent calmness at the two brothers, so different in their demeanor, conduct, and character, the brave man and the coward, the ascetic and the profligate, the honest man and the peculator, and he said to himself, "That mean creature will not have courage to die. And my poor Hulot, such an honest fellow, has death in his knapsack, I know." He sat down again in his big chair and went on reading the despatches from Africa with a look characteristic at once of the coolness of a leader and of the pity roused by the sight of a battlefield. For in reality no one is so humane as a soldier, stern as he may seem in the icy determination acquired by the habit of fighting, and so absolutely essential in the battlefield. Next morning, some of the newspapers contained, under various headings, the following paragraphs: "Monsieur le Baron Hulot d'Ervy has applied for his retiring pension. The unsatisfactory state of the Algerian exchequer, which has come out in consequence of the death and disappearance of 2 employees, has had some share in this distinguished official's decision. On hearing of the delinquencies of the agents whom he had unfortunately trusted, Monsieur le Baron Hulot had a paralytic stroke in the War Minister's private room. Monsieur Hulot d'Ervy, brother to the Marshal Comte de Forzheim, has been 45 years in the service. His determination has been vainly opposed, and is greatly regretted by all who know Monsieur Hulot, whose private virtues are as conspicuous as his administrative capacity. No one can have forgotten the devoted conduct of the Commissary General of the Imperial Guard at Warsaw, or the marvelous promptitude with which he organized supplies for the various sections of the army so suddenly required by Napoleon in 1815. One more of the heroes of the Empire is retiring from the stage. Monsieur le Baron Hulot has never ceased since 1830 to be one of the guiding lights of the State Council and of the War Office." Algiers. The case known as the forage supply case, to which some of our contemporaries have given absurd prominence, has been closed by the death of the chief culprit. Johann Wisch has committed suicide in his cell. His accomplice, who had absconded, will be sentenced in default. Wisch, formerly an army contractor, was an honest man and highly respected, who could not survive the idea of having been the dupe of Chardin, the storekeeper who has disappeared. And in the Paris News the following paragraph appeared: Monsieur le Maréchal, the Minister of War, to prevent the recurrence of such scandals for the future, has arranged for a regular commissariat office in Africa. A head clerk in the War Office, Monsieur Marneffe, is spoken of as likely to be appointed to the post of director. The office vacated by Baron Hulot is the object of much ambition. The appointment is promised, it is said, to Monsieur le Comte Martial de la Roche-Hugon, deputy, brother-in-law to Monsieur le Comte de Rastignac. Monsieur Massal, Master of Appeals, will fill his seat on the Council of State, and Monsieur Claude Vignon becomes Master of Appeals. Of all kinds of false gossip, the most dangerous for the opposition newspapers is the official bogus paragraph. However keen journalists may be, they are sometimes the voluntary or involuntary dupes of the cleverness of those who have risen from the ranks of the press, like Claude Vignon, to the higher realms of power. The newspaper can only be circumvented by the journalist. It may be said, as a parody on a line by Voltaire, "The Paris news is never what the foolish folk believe." End of chapter 30. Chapter 31 of Cousin Betty by Honoré de Balzac. Translated by James Waring. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Bruce Peary. Chapter 31. Marshal Hulot drove home with his brother, who took the front seat, respectfully leaving the whole of the back of the carriage to his senior. The two men spoke not a word. Hector was helpless. The Marshal was lost in thought, like a man who is collecting all his strength and bracing himself to bear a crushing weight. On arriving at his own house, still without speaking, but by an imperious gesture, he beckoned his brother into his study. The Count had received from the Emperor Napoleon a splendid pair of pistols from the Versailles factory. He took the box with its inscription, given by the Emperor Napoleon to General Hulot, out of his desk, and placing it on the top, he showed it to his brother, saying, "There is your remedy." Lisbeth, peeping through the chink of the door, flew down to the carriage and ordered the coachman to go as fast as he could gallop to the Rue Plumet. Within about 20 minutes she had brought back Adeline, whom she had told of the Marshal's threat to his brother. The Marshal, without looking at Hector, rang the bell for his factotum, the old soldier who had served him for 30 years. "Beaupied," said he, "fetch my notary, and Count Steinbock, and my niece Hortense, and the stockbroker to the Treasury. It is now 10:30. They must all be here by 12. Take hackney cabs, and go faster than that," he added, a republican allusion which in past days had been often on his lips. And he put on the scowl that had brought his officers to attention when he was beating the broom on the heaths of Brittany in 1799. See Les Chouans. "You shall be obeyed, Maréchal," said Beaupied, with a military salute. Still paying no heed to his brother, the old man came back into his study, took a key out of his desk, and opened a little malachite box mounted in steel, the gift of the Emperor Alexander. By Napoleon's orders, he had gone to restore to the Russian Emperor the private property seized at the Battle of Dresden, in exchange for which Napoleon hoped to get back Vandamme. The Tsar rewarded General Hulot very handsomely, giving him this casket, and saying that he hoped one day to show the same courtesy to the Emperor of the French. But he kept Vandamme. The imperial arms of Russia were displayed in gold on the lid of the box, which was inlaid with gold. The Marshal counted the banknotes it contained. He had 152,000 francs. He saw this with satisfaction. At the same moment Madame Hulot came into the room, in a state to touch the heart of the sternest judge. She flew into Hector's arms, looking alternately with a crazy eye at the Marshal and at the case of pistols. "What have you to say against your brother? What has my husband done to you?" said she, in such a voice that the Marshal heard her. "He has disgraced us all," replied the Republican veteran, who spoke with a vehemence that reopened one of his old wounds. "He has robbed the Government. He has cast odium on my name. He makes me wish I were dead. He has killed me. I have only strength enough left to make restitution. I have been abased before the Condé of the Republic, the man I esteem above all others, and to whom I unjustifiably gave the lie, the Prince of Wissembourg. Is that nothing? That is the score his country has against him." He wiped away a tear. "Now, as to his family," he went on, "he is robbing you of the bread I had saved for you, the fruit of 30 years' economy, of the privations of an old soldier. Here is what was intended for you," and he held up the banknotes. "He has killed his uncle Fischer, a noble and worthy son of Alsace, who could not, as he can, endure the thought of a stain on his peasant's honor. To crown all, God, in his adorable clemency, had allowed him to choose an angel among women. He has had the unspeakable happiness of having an Adeline for his wife, and he has deceived her. He has soaked her in sorrows. He has neglected her for prostitutes, for street hussies, for ballet girls, actresses, Cadine, Josepha, Marneffe. And that is the brother I treated as a son and made my pride. Go, wretched man. If you can accept the life of degradation you have made for yourself, leave my house. I have not the heart to curse a brother I have loved so well. I am as foolish about him as you are, Adeline, but never let me see him again. I forbid his attending my funeral or following me to the grave. Let him show the decency of a criminal, if he can feel no remorse." The Marshal, as pale as death, fell back on the settee, exhausted by his solemn speech. And for the first time in his life, perhaps, tears gathered in his eyes and rolled down his cheeks. "My poor uncle!" cried Lisbeth, putting a handkerchief to her eyes. "Brother," said Adeline, kneeling down by the Marshal, "live for my sake. Help me in the task of reconciling Hector to the world and making him redeem the past." "He!" cried the Marshal. "If he lives, he is not at the end of his crimes. A man who has misprized an Adeline, who has smothered in his own soul the feelings of a true republican which I tried to instill into him, the love of his country, of his family, and of the poor, that man is a monster, a swine. Take him away if you still care for him, for a voice within me cries to me to load my pistols and blow his brains out. By killing him I should save you all, and I should save him too from himself." The old man started to his feet with such a terrifying gesture that poor Adeline exclaimed, "Hector, come!" She seized her husband's arm, dragged him away and out of the house. But the Baron was so broken down that she was obliged to call a coach to take him to the Rue Plumet, where he went to bed. The man remained there for several days in a sort of half dissolution, refusing all nourishment without a word. By floods of tears Adeline persuaded him to swallow a little broth. She nursed him, sitting by his bed, and feeling only, of all the emotions that once had filled her heart, the deepest pity for him. At 12:30 Lisbeth showed into her dear Marshal's room, for she would not leave him, so much was she alarmed at the evident change in him, Count Steinbock and the notary. "Monsieur le Comte," said the Marshal, "I would beg you to be so good as to put your signature to a document authorizing my niece, your wife, to sell a bond for certain funds of which she at present holds only the reversion. You, Mademoiselle Fischer, will agree to this sale, thus losing your life interest in the securities." "Yes, dear Count," said Lisbeth without hesitation. "Good, my dear," said the old soldier. "I hope I may live to reward you. But I did not doubt you. You are a true republican, a daughter of the people." He took the old maid's hand and kissed it. "Monsieur Hannequin," he went on, speaking to the notary, "draw up the necessary document in the form of a power of attorney, and let me have it within 2 hours, so that I may sell the stock on the Bourse to day. My niece, the Countess, holds the security. She will be here to sign the power of attorney when you bring it, and so will mademoiselle. Monsieur le Comte will be good enough to go with you and sign it at your office." The artist, at a nod from Lisbeth, bowed respectfully to the Marshal and went away. Next morning at 10 o'clock, the Comte de Forzheim sent in to announce himself to the Prince, and was at once admitted. "Well, my dear Hulot," said the Prince, holding out the newspapers to his old friend, "we have saved appearances, you see. Read." Marshal Hulot laid the papers on his comrade's table, and held out to him the 200,000 francs. "Here is the money of which my brother robbed the State," said he. "What madness!" cried the Minister. "It is impossible," he said, into the speaking trumpet handed to him by the Marshal, "to manage this restitution. We should be obliged to declare your brother's dishonest dealings, and we have done everything to hide them." "Do what you like with the money, but the family shall not owe 1 sou of its fortune to a robbery on the funds of the State," said the Count. "I will take the King's commands in the matter. We will discuss it no further," replied the Prince, perceiving that it would be impossible to conquer the old man's sublime obstinacy on the point. "Good bye, Cottin," said the old soldier, taking the Prince's hand. "I feel as if my soul were frozen." Then, after going a step towards the door, he turned round, looked at the Prince, and seeing that he was deeply moved, he opened his arms to clasp him in them. The two old soldiers embraced each other. "I feel as if I were taking leave of the whole of the old army in you," said the Count. "Good bye, my good old comrade," said the Minister. "Yes, it is good bye, for I am going where all our brave men are for whom we have mourned." Just then Claude Vignon was shown in. The two relics of the Napoleonic phalanx bowed gravely to each other, effacing every trace of emotion. "You have, I hope, been satisfied by the papers," said the Master of Appeals elect. "I contrived to let the Opposition papers believe that they were letting out our secrets." "Unfortunately, it is all in vain," replied the Minister, watching Hulot as he left the room. "I have just gone through a leave taking that has been a great grief to me. For, indeed, Marshal Hulot has not 3 days to live. I saw that plainly enough yesterday. That man, one of those honest souls that are above proof, a soldier respected by the bullets in spite of his valor, received his death blow, there in that armchair, and dealt by my hand in a letter. Ring and order my carriage. I must go to Neuilly," said he, putting the 200,000 francs into his official portfolio. Notwithstanding Lisbeth's nursing, Marshal Hulot 3 days later was a dead man. Such men are the glory of the party they support. To Republicans the Marshal was the ideal of patriotism, and they all attended his funeral, which was followed by an immense crowd. The army, the state officials, the court, and the populace all came to do homage to this lofty virtue, this spotless honesty, this immaculate glory. Such a last tribute of the people is not a thing to be had for the asking. This funeral was distinguished by one of those tributes of delicate feeling, of good taste, and sincere respect, which from time to time remind us of the virtues and dignity of the old French nobility. Following the Marshal's bier came the old Marquis de Montauran, the brother of him who, in the great rising of the Chouans in 1799, had been the foe, the luckless foe of Hulot. That marquis, killed by the balls of the Blues, had confided the interests of his young brother to the Republican soldier. See Les Chouans. Hulot had so faithfully acted on the noble Royalist's verbal will, that he succeeded in saving the young man's estates, though he himself was at the time an émigré. And so the homage of the old French nobility was not wanting to the leader who, 9 years since, had conquered Madame. This death, happening just 4 days before the banns were cried for the last time, came upon Lisbeth like the thunderbolt that burns the garnered harvest with the barn. The peasant of Lorraine, as often happens, had succeeded too well. The Marshal had died of the blows dealt to the family by herself and Madame Marneffe. The old maid's vindictiveness, which success seemed to have somewhat mollified, was aggravated by this disappointment of her hopes. Lisbeth went, crying with rage, to Madame Marneffe, for she was homeless, the Marshal having agreed that his lease was at any time to terminate with his life. Crevel, to console Valerie's friend, took charge of her savings, added to them considerably, and invested the capital in 5 per cents, giving her the life interest and putting the securities into Celestine's name. Thanks to this stroke of business, Lisbeth had an income of about 2,000 francs. When the Marshal's property was examined and valued, a note was found, addressed to his sister-in-law, to his niece Hortense, and to his nephew Victorin, desiring that they would pay among them an annuity of 1,200 francs to Mademoiselle Lisbeth Fischer, who was to have been his wife. Adeline, seeing her husband between life and death, succeeded for some days in hiding from him the fact of his brother's death. But Lisbeth came in mourning, and the terrible truth was told him 11 days after the funeral. The crushing blow revived the sick man's energies. He got up, found his family collected in the drawing room, all in black, and suddenly silent as he came in. In a fortnight, Hulot, as lean as a spectre, looked to his family the mere shadow of himself. "I must decide on something," said he in a husky voice as he seated himself in an easy chair and looked round at the party, of whom Crevel and Steinbock were absent. "We cannot stay here, the rent is too high," Hortense was saying, just as her father came in. "As to a home," said Victorin, breaking the painful silence, "I can offer my mother." As he heard these words, which excluded him, the Baron raised his head, which was sunk on his breast as though he were studying the pattern of the carpet, though he did not even see it, and he gave the young lawyer an appealing look. The rights of a father are so indefeasibly sacred, even when he is a villain and devoid of honor, that Victorin paused. "To your mother," the Baron repeated. "You are right, my son." "The room's over ours, in our wing," said Celestine, finishing her husband's sentence. "I am in your way, my dears?" said the Baron, with the mildness of a man who has judged himself. "But do not be uneasy as to the future; you will have no further cause for complaint of your father. You will not see him till the time when you need no longer blush for him." He went up to Hortense and kissed her brow. He opened his arms to his son, who rushed into his embrace, guessing his father's purpose. The Baron signed to Lisbeth, who came to him, and he kissed her forehead. Then he went to his room, whither Adeline followed him in an agony of dread. "My brother was quite right, Adeline," he said, holding her hand. "I am unworthy of my home life. I dared not bless my children, who have behaved so nobly, but in my heart. Tell them that I could only venture to kiss them, for the blessing of a bad man, a father who has been an assassin and the scourge of his family, instead of its protector and its glory, might bring evil on them. But assure them that I shall bless them every day. As to you, God alone, for He is Almighty, can ever reward you according to your merits. I can only ask your forgiveness." And he knelt at her feet, taking her hands and wetting them with his tears. "Hector, Hector, your sins have been great, but divine mercy is infinite, and you may repair all by staying with me. Rise up in Christian charity, my dear. I am your wife and not your judge. I am your possession. Do what you will with me. Take me wherever you go. I feel strong enough to comfort you, to make life endurable to you, by the strength of my love, my care and respect. Our children are settled in life, they need me no more. Let me try to be an amusement to you, an occupation. Let me share the pain of your banishment and of your poverty, and help to mitigate it. I could always be of some use, if it were only to save the expense of a servant. Can you forgive, my dearly beloved Adeline? Yes, only get up, my dear. Well, with that forgiveness I can live, said he, rising to his feet. I came back into this room that my children should not see their father's humiliation. Oh, the sight constantly before their eyes of a father so guilty as I am is a terrible thing. It must undermine parental influence and break every family tie. So I cannot remain among you, and I must go to spare you the odious spectacle of a father bereft of dignity. Do not oppose my departure, Adeline. It would only be to load with your own hand the pistol to blow my brains out. Above all, do not seek me in my hiding place. You would deprive me of the only strong motive remaining in me, that of remorse." Hector's decisiveness silenced his dejected wife. Adeline, lofty in the midst of all this ruin, had derived her courage from her perfect union with her husband, for she had dreamed of having him for her own, of the beautiful task of comforting him, of leading him back to family life, and reconciling him to himself. "But, Hector, would you leave me to die of despair, anxiety, and alarms?" said she, seeing herself bereft of the mainspring of her strength. "I will come back to you, dear angel, sent from heaven expressly for me, I believe. I will come back, if not rich, at least with enough to live in ease. Listen, my sweet Adeline, I cannot stay here for many reasons. In the first place, my pension of 6,000 francs is pledged for 4 years, so I have nothing. That is not all. I shall be committed to prison within a few days in consequence of the bills held by Vauvinet. So I must keep out of the way until my son, to whom I will give full instructions, shall have bought in the bills. My disappearance will facilitate that. As soon as my pension is my own, and Vauvinet is paid off, I will return to you. You would be sure to let out the secret of my hiding place. Be calm. Do not cry, Adeline. It is only for a month. Where will you go? What will you do? What will become of you? Who will take care of you now that you are no longer young? Let me go with you. We will go abroad," said she. "Well, well, we will see," he replied. The Baron rang and ordered Mariette to collect all his things and pack them quickly and secretly. Then, after embracing his wife with a warmth of affection to which she was unaccustomed, he begged her to leave him alone for a few minutes while he wrote his instructions for Victorin, promising that he would not leave the house till dark or without her. As soon as the Baroness was in the drawing-room, the cunning old man stole out through the dressing-closet to the anteroom and went away, giving Mariette a slip of paper on which was written, "Address my trunks to go by railway to Corbeil, to Monsieur Hector, cloak-room, Corbeil." The Baron jumped into a hackney coach and was rushing across Paris by the time Mariette came to give the Baroness this note, and say that her master had gone out. Adeline flew back into her room, trembling more violently than ever. Her children followed on hearing her give a piercing cry. They found her in a dead faint, and they put her to bed, for she was seized by a nervous fever which held her for a month between life and death. "Where is he?" was the only thing she would say. Victorin sought for him in vain. And this is why. The Baron had driven to the Place du Palais Royal. There this man, who had recovered all his wits to work out a scheme which he had premeditated during the days he had spent crushed with pain and grief, crossed the Palais Royal on foot, and took a handsome carriage from a livery stable in the Rue Joquelet. In obedience to his orders, the coachman went to the Rue de la Ville l'Evêque, and into the courtyard of Josepha's mansion, the gates opening at once at the call of the driver of such a splendid vehicle. Josepha came out, prompted by curiosity, for her manservant had told her that a helpless old gentleman, unable to get out of his carriage, begged her to come to him for a moment. "Josepha, it is I." The singer recognized her Hulot only by his voice. "What, you poor old man? On my honor, you look like a 20-franc piece that the Jews have sweated and the money changers refuse." "Alas, yes," replied Hulot. "I am snatched from the jaws of death. But you are as lovely as ever. Will you be kind?" "That depends," said she. "Everything is relative." "Listen," said Hulot. "Can you put me up for a few days in a servant's room under the roof? I have nothing, not a farthing, not a hope. No food, no pension, no wife, no children, no roof over my head, without honor, without courage, without a friend, and worse than all that, liable to imprisonment for not meeting a bill." "Poor old fellow, you are without most things. Are you also sans culotte?" "You laugh at me. I am done for," cried the Baron, "and I counted on you as Gourville did on Ninon." "And it was a real lady, I am told, who brought you to this," said Josepha. "Those precious sluts know how to pluck a goose even better than we do. Why, you are like a corpse that the crows have done with. I can see daylight through." "Time is short, Josepha." "Come in, old boy. I am alone, as it happens, and my people don't know you. Send away your trap. Is it paid for?" "Yes," said the Baron, getting out with the help of Josepha's arm. "You may call yourself my father, if you like," said the singer, moved to pity. She made Hulot sit down in the splendid drawing room where he had last seen her. "And is it the fact, old man," she went on, "that you have killed your brother and your uncle, ruined your family, mortgaged your children's house over and over again, and robbed the government till in Africa, all for your princess?" Hulot sadly bent his head. "Well, I admire that!" cried Josepha, starting up in her enthusiasm. "It is a general flare up. It is Sardanapalus. Splendid, thoroughly complete. I may be a hussy, but I have a soul. I tell you, I like a spendthrift like you, crazy over a woman, 1,000 times better than those torpid, heartless bankers, who are supposed to be so good, and who ruin no end of families with their rails. Gold for them and iron for their gulls. You have only ruined those who belong to you; you have sold no one but yourself. And then you have excuses, physical and moral." She struck a tragic attitude and spouted, "'Tis Venus whose grasp never parts from her prey.' And there you are!" And she pirouetted on her toe. Vice, Hulot found, could forgive him. Vice smiled on him from the midst of unbridled luxury. Here, as before a jury, the magnitude of a crime was an extenuating circumstance. "And is your lady pretty, at any rate?" asked Josepha, trying, as a preliminary act of charity, to divert Hulot's thoughts, for his depression grieved her. "On my word, almost as pretty as you are," said the Baron, artfully. "And monstrously droll? So I have been told. What does she do, I say? Is she better fun than I am?" "I don't want to talk about her," said Hulot. "And I hear she has come round my Crevel, and little Steinbock, and a gorgeous Brazilian?" "Very likely." "And that she has got a house as good as this that Crevel has given her. The baggage! She is my provost marshal, and finishes off those I have spoiled. I tell you why I am so curious to know what she is like, old boy. I just caught sight of her in the Bois in an open carriage, but a long way off. She is a most accomplished harpy, Carabine says. She is trying to eat up Crevel, but he only lets her nibble. Crevel is a knowing hand, good natured but hard headed, who will always say yes, and then go his own way. He is vain and passionate, but his cash is cold. You can never get anything out of such fellows beyond 1,000 to 3,000 francs a month. They jib at any serious outlay, as a donkey does at a running stream. Not like you, old boy. You are a man of passions. You would sell your country for a woman. And look here, I am ready to do anything for you. You are my father. You started me in life. It is a sacred duty. What do you want? Do you want 100,000 francs? I will wear myself to a rag to gain them. As to giving you bed and board, that is nothing. A place will be laid for you here every day. You can have a good room on the second floor, and 100 crowns a month for pocket money." The Baron, deeply touched by such a welcome, had a last qualm of honor. "No, my dear child, no, I did not come here for you to keep me," said he. "At your age it is something to be proud of," said she. "This is what I wish, my child. Your Duc d'Herouville has immense estates in Normandy, and I want to be his steward, under the name of Toul. I have the capacity, and I am honest. A man may borrow of the government, and yet not steal from a cash box." Said Josepha. "Once drunk, drinks again." "In short, I only want to live out of sight for 3 years." "Well, it is soon done," said Josepha. "This evening, after dinner, I have only to speak. The Duke would marry me if I wished it, but I have his fortune, and I want something better his esteem. He is a Duke of the first water. He is high minded, as noble and great as Louis XIV and Napoleon rolled into one, though he is a dwarf. Besides, I have done for him what Lachausse did for Rochefide. By taking my advice, he has made 2 millions. Now, listen to me, old popgun. I know you. You are always after the women, and you would be dancing attendance on the Normandy girls, who are splendid creatures, and getting your ribs cracked by their lovers and fathers, and the Duke would have to get you out of the scrape. Why, can't I see by the way you look at me that the young man is not dead in you, as Fénelon put it? No, this stewardship is not the thing for you. A man cannot be off with his Paris and with us, old boy, for the saying. You would die of weariness at Herouville." "What is to become of me?" said the Baron, "for I will only stay here till I see my way." "Well, shall I find a pigeon-hole for you? Listen, you old pirate. Women are what you want. They are consolation in all circumstances. Attend now. At the end of the alley, Rue Saint-Maur du Temple, there is a poor family I know of where there is a jewel of a little girl, prettier than I was at 16. Ah, there is a twinkle in your eye already. The child works 16 hours a day at embroidering costly pieces for the silk merchants, and earns 16 sous a day, 1 sou an hour, and feeds, like the Irish, on potatoes fried in rat's dripping, with bread, 5 times a week, and drinks canal water out of the town pipes because the Seine water costs too much. And she cannot set up on her own account for lack of 6 or 7,000 francs. Your wife and children bore you to death, don't they? Besides, one cannot submit to be nobody where one has been a little almighty. A father who has neither money nor honor can only be stuffed and kept in a glass case." The Baron could not help smiling at these abominable jests. "Well, now, Bijou is to come to-morrow morning to bring me an embroidered wrapper, a gem. It has taken 6 months to make. No one else will have any stuff like it. Bijou is very fond of me. I give her tidbits and my old gowns, and I send orders for bread and meat and wood to the family, who would break the shin bones of the first comer if I bid them. I try to do a little good. Ah, I know what I endured from hunger myself. Bijou has confided to me all her little sorrows. There is the making of a super at the Ambigu Comique in that child. Her dream is to wear fine dresses like mine, above all to ride in a carriage. I shall say to her, 'Look here, little one, would you like to have a friend of' How old are you?" she asked, interrupting herself. 72? I have given up counting. Would you like an old gentleman of 72, I shall say, very clean and neat, and who does not take snuff, who is as sound as a bell and as good as a young man? He will marry you in the 13th arrondissement, and be very kind to you. He will place 7,000 francs in your account, and furnish you a room all in mahogany, and if you are good, he will sometimes take you to the play. He will give you 100 francs a month for pocket money, and 50 francs for housekeeping. I know Bijou. She is myself at 14. I jumped for joy when that horrible Crevel made me his atrocious offers. Well, and you, old man, will be disposed of for 3 years. She is a good child, well behaved. For 3 or 4 years she will have her illusions, not for longer." Hulot did not hesitate. He had made up his mind to refuse. But to seem grateful to the kind-hearted singer, who was benevolent after her lights, he affected to hesitate between vice and virtue. "Why, you are as cold as a paving stone in winter!" she exclaimed in amazement. "Come now, you will make a whole family happy. A grandfather who runs all the errands, a mother who is being worn out with work, and 2 sisters, one of them very plain, who make 32 sous a day while putting their eyes out. It will make up for the misery you have caused at home, and you will expiate your sin while you are having as much fun as a minx at Mabille." Hulot, to put an end to this temptation, moved his fingers as if he were counting out money. "Oh, be quite easy as to ways and means," replied Josepha. "My Duke will lend you 10,000 francs, 7,000 to start an embroidery shop in Bijou's name, and 3,000 for furnishing, and every 3 months you will find a cheque here for 650 francs. When you get your pension paid you, you can repay the 17,000 francs. Meanwhile, you will be as happy as a cow in clover, and hidden in a hole where the police will never find you. You must wear a loose serge coat, and you will look like a comfortable householder. Call yourself Toul, if that is your fancy. I will tell Bijou that you are an uncle of mine come from Germany, having failed in business, and you will be cosseted like a divinity. There now, Daddy, and who knows, you may have no regrets. In case you should be bored, keep one Sunday rig out, and you can come and ask me for a dinner and spend the evening here." "Ay, and I meant to settle down and behave myself. Look here, borrow 20,000 francs for me, and I will set out to make my fortune in America, like my friend d'Aiglemont when Nucingen cleaned him out." "You!" cried Josepha. "Nay, leave morals to workaday folks, to raw recruits, to the worthy citizens who have nothing to boast of but their virtue. You were born to be something better than a nincompoop. You are as a man what I am as a woman, a spendthrift of genius." "We will sleep on it and discuss it all tomorrow morning." "You will dine with the Duke. My d'Herouville will receive you as civilly as if you were the savior of the State, and tomorrow you can decide. Come, be jolly, old boy. Life is a garment. When it is dirty, we must brush it; when it is ragged, it must be patched, but we keep it on as long as we can." This philosophy of life and her high spirits postponed Hulot's keenest pangs. At noon next day, after a capital breakfast, Hulot saw the arrival of one of those living masterpieces which Paris alone of all the cities in the world can produce, by means of the constant concubinage of luxury and poverty, of vice and decent honesty, of suppressed desire and renewed temptation, which makes the French capital the daughter of Nineveh, of Babylon, and of imperial Rome. Mademoiselle Olympe Bijou, a child of 16, had the exquisite face which Raphael drew for his virgins, eyes of pathetic innocence, weary with overwork, black eyes with long lashes, their moisture parched with the heat of laborious nights and darkened with fatigue, a complexion like porcelain, almost too delicate, a mouth like a partly opened pomegranate, a heaving bosom, a full figure, pretty hands, the whitest teeth, and a mass of black hair, and the whole meagrely set off by a cotton frock at 75 centimes the metre, leather shoes without heels, and the cheapest gloves. The girl, all unconscious of her charms, had put on her best frock to wait on the fine lady. The Baron, gripped again by the clutch of profligacy, felt all his life concentrated in his eyes. He forgot everything on beholding this delightful creature. He was like a sportsman in sight of the game. If an emperor were present, he must take aim. "And warranted sound," said Josepha in his ear. "An honest child and wanting bread. This is Paris. I have been there." "It is a bargain," replied the old man, getting up and rubbing his hands. When Olympe Bijou was gone, Josepha looked mischievously at the Baron. "If you want things to keep straight, Daddy," said she, "be as firm as the public prosecutor on the bench. Keep a tight hand on her. Be a Bartholo. Wear Auguste, Hippolyte, Nestor, Victor, or, that is, gold, in every form. When once the child is fed and dressed, if she gets the upper hand, she will drive you like a serf. I will see to settling you comfortably. The Duke does the handsome; he will lend, that is, give you 10,000 francs, and he deposits 8,000 with his notary, who will pay you 600 francs every quarter, for I cannot trust you. Now, am I nice?" Adorable. 10 days after deserting his family, when they were gathered round Adeline, who seemed to be dying, as she said again and again in a weak voice, "Where is he?" Hector, under the name of Thoul, was established in the Rue Saint Maur, at the head of a business as embroiderer, under the name of Thoul and Bijou. End of chapter 31. Chapter 32 of Cousin Betty by Honoré de Balzac, translated by James Waring. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Bruce Peary. Chapter 32. Victorin Hulot, under the overwhelming disasters of his family, had received the finishing touch which makes or mars the man. He was perfection. In the great storms of life, we act like the captain of a ship who, under the stress of a hurricane, lightens the ship of its heaviest cargo. The young lawyer lost his self-conscious pride, his too evident assertiveness, his arrogance as an orator, and his political pretensions. He was as a man what his wife was as a woman. He made up his mind to make the best of his Celestine, who certainly did not realize his dreams, and was wise enough to estimate life at its true value by contenting himself in all things with the second best. He vowed to fulfil his duties, so much had he been shocked by his father's example. These feelings were confirmed as he stood by his mother's bed on the day when she was out of danger. Nor did this happiness come single. Claude Vignon, who called every day from the Prince de Wissembourg to inquire as to Madame Hulot's progress, desired the re-elected deputy to go with him to see the minister. "His Excellency," said he, "wants to talk over your family affairs with you." The Prince had long known Victorin Hulot, and received him with a friendliness that promised well. "My dear fellow," said the old soldier, "I promised your uncle in this room that I would take care of your mother. That saintly woman, I am told, is getting well again. Now is the time to pour oil into your wounds. I have for you here 200,000 francs. I will give them to you." The lawyer's gesture was worthy of his uncle, the Marshal. "Be quite easy," said the Prince, smiling. "It is money in trust. My days are numbered. I shall not always be here, so take this sum and fill my place towards your family. You may use this money to pay off the mortgage on your house. These 200,000 francs are the property of your mother and your sister. If I gave the money to Madame Hulot, I fear that, in her devotion to her husband, she would be tempted to waste it. And the intention of those who restore it to you is, that it should produce bread for Madame Hulot and her daughter, the Countess Steinbock. You are a steady man, the worthy son of your noble mother, the true nephew of my friend the Marshal. You are appreciated here, you see, and elsewhere. So be the guardian angel of your family, and take this as a legacy from your uncle and me." "Monseigneur," said Hulot, taking the minister's hand and pressing it, "such men as you know that thanks in words mean nothing. Gratitude must be proven." "Prove yours," said the old man. "In what way?" "By accepting what I have to offer you," said the minister. "We propose to appoint you to be attorney to the War Office, which just now is involved in litigations in consequence of the plan for fortifying Paris; consulting clerk also to the Prefecture of Police; and a member of the Board of the Civil List. These 3 appointments will secure you salaries amounting to 18,000 francs, and will leave you politically free. You can vote in the Chamber in obedience to your opinions and your conscience. Act in perfect freedom on that score. It would be a bad thing for us if there were no national opposition. Also, a few lines from your uncle, written a day or 2 before he breathed his last, suggested what I could do for your mother, whom he loved very truly. Mesdames Popinot, de Rastignac, de Navarreins, d'Espard, de Grandlieu, de Carigliano, de Lenoncourt, and de la Batie have made a place for your mother as a lady superintendent of their charities. These ladies, presidents of various branches of benevolent work, cannot do everything themselves. They need a lady of character who can act for them by going to see the objects of their beneficence, ascertaining that charity is not imposed upon, and whether the help given really reaches those who applied for it, finding out that the poor who are ashamed to beg, and so forth. Your mother will fulfill an angelic function. She will be thrown in with none but priests and these charitable ladies. She will be paid 6,000 francs and the cost of her hackney coaches. You see, young man, that a pure and nobly virtuous man can still assist his family, even from the grave. Such a name as your uncle's is, and ought to be, a buckler against misfortune in a well organized scheme of society. Follow in his path. You have started in it, I know. Continue in it." "Such delicate kindness cannot surprise me in my mother's friend," said Victorin. "I will try to come up to all your hopes." "Go at once and take comfort to your family. By the way," added the Prince as he shook hands with Victorin, "your father has disappeared?" "Alas, yes." "So much the better. That unhappy man has shown his wit, in which indeed he is not lacking. There are bills of his to be met. Well, you shall have 6 months' pay of your 3 appointments in advance. This prepayment will help you perhaps to get the notes out of the hands of the moneylender. And I will see Nucingen, and perhaps may succeed in releasing your father's pension, pledged to him, without its costing you or our office a sou. The peer has not killed the banker in Nucingen. He is insatiable; he wants some concession, I know not what." So, on his return to the Rue Plumet, Victorin could carry out his plan of lodging his mother and sister under his roof. The young lawyer, already famous, had for his sole fortune one of the handsomest houses in Paris, purchased in 1834 in preparation for his marriage, situated on the boulevard between the Rue de la Paix and the Rue Louis le Grand. A speculator had built 2 houses between the boulevard and the street, and between these, with the gardens and courtyards to the front and back, there remained still standing a splendid wing, the remains of the magnificent mansion of the Verneuil. The younger Hulot had purchased this fine property on the strength of Mademoiselle Crevel's marriage portion for 1,000,000 francs when it was put up to auction, paying 500,000 down. He lived on the ground floor, expecting to pay the remainder out of letting the rest. But though it is safe to speculate in house property in Paris, such investments are capricious or hang fire, depending on unforeseen circumstances. As the Parisian lounger may have observed, the boulevard between the Rue de la Paix and the Rue Louis le Grand prospered but slowly. It took so long to furbish and beautify itself that trade did not set up its display there till 1840. The gold of the money changers, the fairy work of fashion, and the luxurious splendor of shop fronts. In spite of 200,000 francs given by Crevel to his daughter at the time when his vanity was flattered by this marriage, before the Baron had robbed him of Josepha, in spite of the 200,000 francs paid off by Victorin in the course of 7 years, the property was still burdened with a debt of 500,000 francs, in consequence of Victorin's devotion to his father. Happily, a rise in rents and the advantages of the situation had at this time improved the value of the houses. The speculation was justifying itself after 8 years' patience, during which the lawyer had strained every nerve to pay the interest and some trifling amounts of the capital borrowed. The tradespeople were ready to offer good rents for the shops, on condition of being granted leases for 18 years. The dwelling apartments rose in value by the shifting of the centre in Paris life, henceforth transferred to the region between the Bourse and the Madeleine, now the seat of the political power and financial authority in Paris. The money paid to him by the minister, added to a year's rent in advance and the premiums paid by his tenants, would finally reduce the outstanding debt to 200,000 francs. The two houses, if entirely let, would bring in 100,000 francs a year. Within 2 years more, during which the Hulots could live on his salaries, added to by the Marshal's investments, Victorin would be in a splendid position. This was manna from heaven. Victorin could give up the first floor of his own house to his mother, and the second to Hortense, excepting 2 rooms reserved for Lisbeth. With Cousin Betty as the housekeeper, this compound household could bear all these charges, and yet keep up a good appearance, as beseemed a pleader of note. The great stars of the law courts were rapidly disappearing, and Victorin Hulot, gifted with a shrewd tongue and strict honesty, was listened to by the bench and councillors. He studied his cases thoroughly, and advanced nothing that he could not prove. He would not hold every brief that offered. In fact, he was a credit to the bar. The Baroness' home in the Rue Plumet had become so odious to her that she allowed herself to be taken to the Rue Louis le Grand. Thus, by her son's care, Adeline occupied a fine apartment. She was spared all the daily worries of life, for Lisbeth consented to begin again, working wonders of domestic economy, such as she had achieved for Madame Marneffe, seeing here a way of exerting her silent vengeance on those 3 noble lives, the object each of her hatred, which was kept growing by the overthrow of all her hopes. Once a month she went to see Valerie, sent, indeed, by Hortense, who wanted news of Wenceslas, and by Celestine, who was seriously uneasy at the acknowledged and well-known connection between her father and a woman to whom her mother-in-law and sister-in-law owed their ruin and their sorrows. As may be supposed, Lisbeth took advantage of this to see Valerie as often as possible. Thus about 20 months passed by, during which the Baroness recovered her health, though her palsied trembling never left her. She made herself familiar with her duties, which afforded her a noble distraction from her sorrow and constant food for the divine goodness of her heart. She also regarded it as an opportunity for finding her husband in the course of one of those expeditions which took her into every part of Paris. During this time Vauvinet had been paid, and the pension of 6,000 francs was almost redeemed. Victorin could maintain his mother as well as Hortense out of the 10,000 francs interest on the money left by Marshal Hulot in trust for them. Adeline's salary amounted to 6,000 francs a year, and this, added to the Baron's pension when it was freed, would presently secure an income of 12,000 francs a year to the mother and daughter. Thus the poor woman would have been almost happy, but for her perpetual anxieties as to the Baron's fate, for she longed to have him with her to share the improved fortunes that smiled on the family. And but for the constant sight of her forsaken daughter, and but for the terrible thrusts constantly and unconsciously dealt her by Lisbeth, whose diabolical character had free course. A scene which took place at the beginning of the month of March 1843 will show the results of Lisbeth's latent and persistent hatred, still seconded, as she always was, by Madame Marneffe. Two great events had occurred in the Marneffe household. In the first place, Valerie had given birth to a stillborn child, whose little coffin had cost her 2,000 francs a year. And then, as to Marneffe himself, 11 months since, this is the report given by Lisbeth to the Hulot family one day on her return from a visit of discovery at the Hotel Marneffe. "This morning," said she, "that dreadful Valerie sent for Dr. Bianchon to ask whether the medical men who had condemned her husband yesterday had made no mistake. Bianchon pronounced that to-night, at the latest, that horrible creature will depart to the torments that await him. Old Crevel and Madame Marneffe saw the doctor out, and your father, my dear Celestine, gave him 5 gold pieces for his good news. When he came back into the drawing-room, Crevel cut capers like a dancer. He embraced that woman, exclaiming, 'Then at last you will be Madame Crevel.' And to me, when she had gone back to her husband's bedside, for he was at his last gasp, your noble father said to me, 'With Valerie as my wife, I can become a peer of France. I shall buy an estate I have my eye on, Presles, which Madame de Serizy wants to sell. I shall be Crevel de Presles, member of the Common Council of Seine-et-Oise, and deputy. I shall have a son. I shall be everything I have ever wished to be.' 'Heh!' said I, 'and what about your daughter?' 'Bah!' says he, 'she is only a woman, and she is quite too much of an Hulot. Valerie has a horror of them all. My son-in-law has never chosen to come to this house. Why has he given himself such airs as a mentor, a Spartan, a Puritan, a philanthropist? Besides, I have squared accounts with my daughter. She has had all her mother's fortune, and 200,000 francs to that. So I am free to act as I please. I shall judge of my son-in-law and Celestine by their conduct on my marriage. As they behave, so shall I. If they are nice to their stepmother, I will receive them. I am a man, after all." In short, all this rhodomontade, and an attitude like Napoleon on the column. The 10 months' widowhood insisted on by the law had now elapsed some few days since. The estate of Presles was purchased. Victorin and Celestine had that very morning sent Lisbeth to make inquiries as to the marriage of the fascinating widow to the mayor of Paris, now a member of the Common Council of the department of Seine-et-Oise. Celestine and Hortense, in whom the ties of affection had been drawn closer since they had lived under the same roof, were almost inseparable. The Baroness, carried away by a sense of honesty which led her to exaggerate the duties of her place, devoted herself to the work of charity of which she was the agent. She was out almost every day from 11 till 5. The sisters in law, united in their cares for the children whom they kept together, sat at home and worked. They had arrived at the intimacy which thinks aloud, and were a touching picture of two sisters, one cheerful and the other sad. The less happy of the two, handsome, lively, high-spirited, and clever, seemed by her manner to defy her painful situation. while the melancholy Célestine, sweet and calm and as equable as reason itself, might have been supposed to have some secret grief. It was this contradiction, perhaps, that added to their warm friendship. Each supplied the other with what she lacked. Seated in a little summer house in the garden, which the speculator's trowel had spared by some fancy of the builder's, who believed that he was preserving these 100 feet square of earth for his own pleasure, they were admiring the first green shoots of the lilac trees, a spring festival which can only be fully appreciated in Paris when the inhabitants have lived for 6 months oblivious of what vegetation means among the cliffs of stone where the ocean of humanity tosses to and fro. "Célestine," said Hortense to her sister-in-law, who had complained that in such fine weather her husband should be kept at the Chamber, "I think you do not fully appreciate your happiness. Victorin is a perfect angel, and you sometimes torment him." "My dear, men like to be tormented. Certain ways of teasing are a proof of affection. If your poor mother had only been, I will not say exacting, but always prepared to be exacting, you would not have had so much to grieve over." "Lisbeth is not come back. I shall have to sing the song of Malbrouck," said Hortense. "I do long for some news of Wenceslas. What does he live on? He has not done a thing these 2 years." "Victorin saw him, he told me, with that horrible woman not long ago, and he fancied that she maintains him in idleness. If you only would, dear soul, you might bring your husband back to you yet." Hortense shook her head. "Believe me," Célestine went on, "the position will ere long be intolerable. In the first instance, rage, despair, indignation gave you strength. The awful disasters that have come upon us since, 2 deaths, ruin, and the disappearance of Baron Hulot, have occupied your mind and heart. But now you live in peace and silence. You will find it hard to bear the void in your life. And as you cannot and will never leave the path of virtue, you will have to be reconciled to Wenceslas. Victorin, who loves you so much, is of that opinion. There is something stronger than one's feelings even, and that is nature." "But such a mean creature!" cried the proud Hortense. "He cares for that woman because she feeds him. And has she paid his debts, do you suppose? Good heaven! I think of that man's position day and night. He is the father of my child, and he is degrading himself." "But look at your mother, my dear," said Célestine. Célestine was one of those women who, when you have given them reasons enough to convince a Breton peasant, still go back for the 100th time to their original argument. The character of her face, somewhat flat, dull, and common, her light brown hair in stiff, neat bands, her very complexion spoke of a sensible woman, devoid of charm, but also devoid of weakness. The Baroness would willingly go to join her husband in his disgrace, to comfort him and hide him in her heart from every eye, Célestine went on. Why, she has a room made ready upstairs for Monsieur Hulot, as if she expected to find him and bring him home from one day to the next." "Oh yes, my mother is sublime," replied Hortense. "She has been so every minute of every day for 26 years; but I am not like her. It is not my nature. How can I help it? I am angry with myself sometimes. But you do not know, Célestine, what it would be to make terms with infamy." "There is my father," said Célestine placidly. "He has certainly started on the road that ruined yours. He is 10 years younger than the Baron, to be sure, and was only a tradesman. But how can it end? This Madame Marneffe has made a slave of my father; he is her dog. She is mistress of his fortune and his opinions, and nothing can open his eyes. I tremble when I remember that their banns of marriage are already published. My husband means to make a last attempt. He thinks it a duty to try to avenge society and the family, and bring that woman to account for all her crimes. Alas, my dear Hortense, such lofty souls as Victorin and hearts like ours come too late to a comprehension of the world and its ways. This is a secret, dear, and I have told you because you are interested in it, but never by a word or a look betray it to Lisbeth, or your mother, or anybody, for "Here is Lisbeth," said Hortense. "Well, cousin, and how is the inferno of the Rue Barbet going on?" "Badly for you, my children. Your husband, my dear Hortense, is more crazy about that woman than ever, and she, I must own, is madly in love with him. Your father, dear Celestine, is gloriously blind. That, to be sure, is nothing. I have had occasion to see it once a fortnight. Really, I am lucky never to have had anything to do with men; they are besotted creatures. 5 days hence, you, dear child, and Victorin will have lost your father's fortune." "Then the banns are cried," said Celestine. "Yes," said Lisbeth, "and I have just been arguing your case. I pointed out to that monster, who is going the way of the other, that if he would only get you out of the difficulties you are in by paying off the mortgage on your house, you would show your gratitude and receive your stepmother." Hortense started in horror. "Victorin will see about that," said Celestine coldly. "But do you know what Monsieur le Maire's answer was?" said Lisbeth. "I mean to leave them where they are. Horses can only be broken in by lack of food, sleep, and sugar. Why, Baron Hulot was not so bad as Monsieur Crevel. So, my poor dears, you may say good bye to the money. And such a fine fortune! Your father paid 3,000,000 francs for the Presles estate, and he has 30,000 francs a year in stocks. Oh, he has no secrets from me. He talks of buying the Hotel des Navarreins in the Rue du Bac. Madame Marneffe herself has 40,000 francs a year. Ah, here is our guardian angel, here comes your mother," she exclaimed, hearing the rumble of wheels. And presently the Baroness came down the garden steps and joined the party. At 55, though crushed by so many troubles, and constantly trembling as if shivering with ague, Adeline, whose face was indeed pale and wrinkled, still had a fine figure, a noble outline, and natural dignity. Those who saw her said, "She must have been beautiful." Worn with the grief of not knowing her husband's fate, of being unable to share with him this oasis in the heart of Paris, this peace and seclusion, and the better fortune that was dawning on the family, her beauty was the beauty of a ruin. As each gleam of hope died out, each day of search proved vain, Adeline sank into fits of deep melancholy that drove her children to despair. The Baroness had gone out that morning with fresh hopes, and was anxiously expected. An official, who was under obligations to Hulot, to whom he owed his position and advancement, declared that he had seen the Baron in a box at the Ambigu Comique theatre with a woman of extraordinary beauty. So Adeline had gone to call on the Baron Verneuil. This important personage, while asserting that he had positively seen his old patron, and that his behaviour to the woman indicated an illicit establishment, told Madame Hulot that to avoid meeting him the Baron had left long before the end of the play. "He looked like a man at home with the damsel, but his dress betrayed some lack of means," said he in conclusion. "Well?" said the three women as the Baroness came towards them. "Well, Monsieur Hulot is in Paris, and to me," said Adeline, "it is a gleam of happiness only to know that he is within reach of us." "But he does not seem to have mended his ways," Lisbeth remarked when Adeline had finished her report of her visit to Baron Verneuil. "He has taken up some little work girl, but where can he get the money from? I could bet that he begs of his former mistresses, Mademoiselle Jenny Cadine or Josepha." The Baroness trembled more severely than ever, every nerve quivered; she wiped away the tears that rose to her eyes, and looked mournfully up to heaven. I cannot think that a Grand Commander of the Legion of Honor will have fallen so low," said she. "For his pleasure, what would he not do?" said Lisbeth. "He robbed the State, he will rob private persons, commit murder, who knows?" "Oh, Lisbeth!" cried the Baroness, "keep such thoughts to yourself." At this moment Louise came up to the family group, now increased by the arrival of the two Hulot children and little Wenceslas, to see if their grandmother's pockets did not contain some sweetmeats. "What is it, Louise?" asked one and another. "A man who wants to see Mademoiselle Fischer." "Who is the man?" asked Lisbeth. "He is in rags, mademoiselle, and covered with flue like a mattress picker. His nose is red, and he smells of brandy. He is one of those men who work half of the week at most." This uninviting picture had the effect of making Lisbeth hurry into the courtyard of the house in the Rue Louis le Grand, where she found a man smoking a pipe colored in a style that showed him an artist in tobacco. "Why have you come here, Pere Chardin?" she asked. "It is understood that you go on the first Saturday in every month to the gate of the Hôtel Marneffe, Rue Barbet de Jouy. I have just come back after waiting there for 5 hours, and you did not come." "I did go there, good and charitable lady," replied the mattress picker. "But there was a game at pool going on in the Café des Savants, Rue de Cerf Volant, and every man has his fancy. Now, mine is billiards. If it wasn't for billiards, I might be eating off silver plate. For, I tell you this," and he fumbled for a scrap of paper in his ragged trousers pocket, "it is billiards that leads on to a dram and plum brandy. It is ruinous, like all fine things, in the things it leads to. I know your orders, but the old 'un is in such a quandary that I came on to forbidden grounds. If the hair was all hair, we might sleep sound on it, but it is mixed. God is not for all, as the saying goes. He has his favorites. Well, he has the right. Now, here is the writing of your estimable relative and my very good friend. His political opinion." Chardin attempted to trace some zigzag lines in the air with the forefinger of his right hand. Lisbeth, not listening to him, read these few words: "Dear cousin, be my providence. Give me 300 francs this day. Hector." "What does he want so much money for?" "The landlord," said Chardin, still trying to sketch arabesques. "And then my son, you see, has come back from Algiers, through Spain and Bayonne, and he has found nothing. Against his rule, for a sharp cove is my son, saving your presence. How can he help it? He is in want of food, but he will repay all we lend him, for he is going to get up a company. He has ideas, he has, that will carry him—" "To the police court," Lisbeth put in. "He murdered my uncle, I shall not forget that." Why, he could not bleed a chicken, honorable lady." "Here are the 300 francs," said Lisbeth, taking 15 gold pieces out of her purse. "Now go, and never come here again." She saw the father of the Oran storekeeper off the premises, and pointed out the drunken old creature to the porter. "At any time when that man comes here, if by chance he should come again, do not let him in. If he should ask whether Monsieur Hulot junior or Madame la Baronne Hulot lives here, tell him you know of no such persons." "Very good, mademoiselle." "Your place depends on it if you make any mistake, even without intending it," said Lisbeth in the woman's ear. "Cousin," she went on to Victorin, who just now came in, "a great misfortune is hanging over your head." "What is that?" said Victorin. "Within a few days Madame Marneffe will be your wife's stepmother." "That remains to be seen," replied Victorin. For 6 months past, Lisbeth had very regularly paid a little allowance to Baron Hulot, her former protector, whom she now protected. She knew the secret of his dwelling place, and relished Adeline's tears, saying to her, as we have seen, when she saw her cheerful and hopeful, You may expect to find my poor cousin's name in the papers some day under the heading Police Report." But in this, as on a former occasion, she let her vengeance carry her too far. She had aroused the prudent suspicions of Victorin. He had resolved to be rid of this Damocles' sword so constantly flourished over them by Lisbeth, and of the female demon to whom his mother and the family owed so many woes. The Prince de Wissembourg, knowing all about Madame Marneffe's conduct, approved of the young lawyer's secret project. He had promised him, as a president of the council can promise, the secret assistance of the police to enlighten Crevel and rescue a fine fortune from the clutches of the diabolical courtesan, whom he could not forgive either for causing the death of Marshal Hulot or for the Baron's utter ruin. End of chapter 32. Chapter 33 of Cousin Betty by Honoré de Balzac, translated by James Waring. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Bruce Peary. Chapter 33. The words spoken by Lisbeth, "He begs of his former mistresses," haunted the Baroness all night. Like sick men given over by the physicians who have recourse to quacks, like men who have fallen into the lowest Dantesque circle of despair, or drowning creatures who mistake a floating stick for a hawser, she ended by believing in the baseness of which the mere idea had horrified her, and it occurred to her that she might apply for help to one of those terrible women. Next morning, without consulting her children or saying a word to anybody, she went to see Mademoiselle Josepha Mira, prima donna of the Royal Academy of Music, to find or to lose the hope that had gleamed before her like a will-o'-the-wisp. At midday the great singer's waiting maid brought her in the card of the Baronne Hulot, saying that this person was waiting at the door, having asked whether mademoiselle could receive her. "Are the rooms done?" "Yes, mademoiselle." "And the flowers fresh?" "Yes, mademoiselle." "Just tell Jean to look round and see that everything is as it should be before showing the lady in, and treat her with the greatest respect. Go, and come back to dress me. I must look my very best." She went to study herself in the long glass. "Now to put our best foot foremost," said she to herself. "Vice under arms to meet virtue. Poor woman, what can she want of me? I cannot bear to see. The noble victim of outrageous fortune." And she sang through the famous aria as the maid came in again. "Madame," said the girl, "the lady has a nervous trembling." "Offer her some orange water, some rum, some broth." "I did, mademoiselle, but she declines everything, and says it is an infirmity, a nervous complaint." "Where is she?" "In the big drawing room." "Well, make haste, child. Give me my smartest slippers, the dressing gown embroidered by Bijou, and no end of lace frills. Do my hair in a way to astonish a woman. This woman plays a part against mine. And tell the lady, for she is a real great lady, my girl, nay, more, she is what you will never be, a woman whose prayers can rescue souls from your purgatory. Tell her I was in bed, as I was playing last night, and that I am just getting up." The Baroness, shown into Josepha's handsome drawing room, did not note how long she was kept waiting there, though it was a long half hour. This room, entirely redecorated even since Josepha had had the house, was hung with silk in purple and gold color. The luxury which fine gentlemen were wont to lavish on their petites maisons, the scenes of their profligacy, of which the remains still bear witness to the follies from which they were so aptly named, was displayed to perfection, thanks to modern inventiveness, in the 4 rooms opening into each other, where the warm temperature was maintained by a system of hot air pipes with invisible openings. The Baroness, quite bewildered, examined each work of art with the greatest amazement. Here she found fortunes accounted for that melt in the crucible under which pleasure and vanity feed the devouring flames. This woman, who for 26 years had lived among the dead relics of imperial magnificence, whose eyes were accustomed to carpets patterned with faded flowers, rubbed gilding, silks as forlorn as her heart, half understood the powerful fascinations of vice as she studied its results. It was impossible not to wish to possess these beautiful things, these admirable works of art, the creation of the unknown talent which abounds in Paris in our day and produces treasures for all Europe. Each thing had the novel charm of unique perfection. The models being destroyed, every vase, every figure, every piece of sculpture was the original. This is the crowning grace of modern luxury. To own the thing which is not vulgarized by the 2,000 wealthy citizens, whose notion of luxury is the lavish display of the splendors that shops can supply, is the stamp of true luxury, the luxury of the fine gentlemen of the day, the shooting stars of the Paris firmament. As she examined the flower stands, filled with the choicest exotic plants, mounted in chased brass and inlaid in the style of Boule, the Baroness was scared by the idea of the wealth in this apartment. And this impression naturally shed a glamour over the person round whom all this profusion was heaped. Adeline imagined that Josepha Mirah, whose portrait by Joseph Bridau was the glory of the adjoining boudoir, must be a singer of genius, a Malibran, and she expected to see a real star. She was sorry she had come, but she had been prompted by a strong and so natural a feeling, by such purely disinterested devotion, that she collected all her courage for the interview. Besides, she was about to satisfy her urgent curiosity, to see for herself what was the charm of this kind of women, that they could extract so much gold from the miserly ore of Paris mud. The Baroness looked at herself to see if she were not a blot on all this splendor, but she was well dressed in her velvet gown, with a little cape trimmed with beautiful lace, and her velvet bonnet of the same shade was becoming. Seeing herself still as imposing as any queen, always a queen, even in her fall, she reflected that the dignity of sorrow was a match for the dignity of talent. At last, after much opening and shutting of doors, she saw Josepha. The singer bore a strong resemblance to Allori's Judith, which dwells in the memory of all who have ever seen it in the Pitti Palace, near the door of one of the great rooms. She had the same haughty mien, the same fine features, black hair simply knotted, and a yellow wrapper with little embroidered flowers, exactly like the brocade worn by the Immortal Homicide, conceived of by Bronzino's nephew. "Madame la Baronne, I am quite overwhelmed by the honor you do me in coming here," said the singer, resolved to play her part as a great lady with a grace. She pushed forward an easy chair for the Baroness and seated herself on a stool. She discerned the faded beauty of the woman before her, and was filled with pity as she saw her shaken by the nervous palsy that, on the least excitement, became convulsive. She could read at a glance the saintly life described to her of old by Hulot and Crevel, and she not only ceased to think of a contest with her, she humiliated herself before a superiority she appreciated. The great artist could admire what the courtesan laughed to scorn. "Mademoiselle, despair brought me here. It reduces us to any means." A look in Josepha's face made the Baroness feel that she had wounded the woman from whom she hoped for so much, and she looked at her. Her beseeching eyes extinguished the flash in Josepha's. The singer smiled. It was a wordless dialogue of pathetic eloquence. "It is now 2 years and a half since Monsieur Hulot left his family, and I do not know where to find him, though I know that he lives in Paris," said the Baroness with emotion. "A dream suggested to me the idea, an absurd one perhaps, that you may have interested yourself in Monsieur Hulot. If you could enable me to see him, Oh, mademoiselle, I would pray heaven for you every day as long as I live in this world." Two large tears in the singer's eyes told what her reply would be. "Madame," said she, "I have done you an injury without knowing you, but now that I have the happiness of seeing in you the most perfect virtue on earth, believe me, I am sensible of the extent of my fault. I repent sincerely, and believe me, I will do all in my power to remedy it." She took Madame Hulot's hand, and before the lady could do anything to hinder her, she kissed it respectfully, even humbling herself to bend one knee. Then she rose, as proud as when she stood on the stage in the part of Mathilde, and rang the bell. "Go on horseback," said she to the manservant, "and kill the horse if you must, to find little Bijou, Rue Saint Maur du Temple, and bring her here. Put her into a coach, and pay the coachman to come at a gallop. Do not lose a moment, or you lose your place. Madame," she went on, coming back to the Baroness, and speaking to her in respectful tones, "you must forgive me. As soon as the Duc d'Herouville became my protector, I dismissed the Baron, having heard that he was ruining his family for me. What more could I do? In an actress's career, a protector is indispensable from the first day of her appearance on the boards. Our salaries do not pay half our expenses; we must have a temporary husband. I did not value Monsieur Hulot, who took me away from a rich man, a conceited idiot. Old Crevel would undoubtedly have married me." "So he told me," said the Baroness, interrupting her. "Well, then, you see, madame, I might at this day have been an honest woman with only one legitimate husband." "You have many excuses, mademoiselle," said Adeline, "and God will take them into account. But for my part, far from reproaching you, I came, on the contrary, to make myself your debtor in gratitude." "Madame, for nearly 3 years I have provided for Monsieur le Baron's necessities." "You?" interrupted the Baroness, with tears in her eyes. "Oh, what can I do for you? I can only pray." "I and Monsieur le Duc d'Herouville," the singer said. "A noble soul, a true gentleman." And Josepha related the settling and marriage of Monsieur Thoul. "And so, thanks to you, mademoiselle, the Baron has wanted nothing?" "We have done our best to that end, madame." "And where is he now?" "About 6 months ago, Monsieur le Duc told me that the Baron, known to the notary by the name of Thoul, had drawn all the 8,000 francs that were to have been paid to him in fixed sums once a quarter," replied Josepha. "We have heard no more of the Baron, neither I nor Monsieur d'Herouville. Our lives are so full, we artists are so busy, that I really have not time to run after old Thoul. As it happens, for the last 6 months, Bijou, who works for me, his what shall I say?" "His mistress," said Madame Hulot. "His mistress," repeated Josepha, "has not been here. Mademoiselle Olympe Bijou is perhaps divorced. Divorce is common in the 13th arrondissement." Josepha rose, and foraging among the rare plants in her stands, made a charming bouquet for Madame Hulot, whose expectations, it may be said, were by no means fulfilled. Like those worthy folk who take men of genius to be a sort of monsters, eating, drinking, walking, and speaking unlike other people, the Baroness had hoped to see Josepha the opera singer, the witch, the amorous and amusing courtesan. She saw a calm and well-mannered woman, with the dignity of talent, the simplicity of an actress who knows herself to be at night a queen, and also, better than all, a woman of the town whose eyes, attitude, and demeanor paid full and ungrudging homage to the virtuous wife, the Mater Dolorosa of the sacred hymn, and who was crowning her sorrows with flowers, as the Madonna is crowned in Italy. "Madame," said the manservant, reappearing at the end of half an hour, "Madame Bijou is on her way, but you are not to expect little Olympe. Your needlewoman, madame, is settled in life; she is married." "More or less?" said Josepha. "No, madame, really married. She is at the head of a very fine business. She has married the owner of a large and fashionable shop, on which they have spent millions of francs on the Boulevard des Italiens, and she has left the embroidery business to her sister and mother. She is Madame Grenouville. The fat tradesman—" "A Crevel?" "Yes, madame," said the man. "Well, he has settled 30,000 francs a year on Mademoiselle Bijou by the marriage articles, and her elder sister, they say, is going to be married to a rich butcher." "Your business looks rather hopeless, I am afraid," said Josepha to the Baroness. "Monsieur le Baron is no longer where I lodged him." 10 minutes later, Madame Bijou was announced. Josepha very prudently placed the Baroness in the boudoir and drew the curtain over the door. "You would scare her," said she to Madame Hulot. "She would let nothing out if she suspected that you were interested in the information. Leave me to catechize her. Hide there, and you will hear everything. It is a scene that is played quite as often in real life as on the stage." "Well, Mother Bijou," she said to an old woman dressed in tartan stuff, and who looked like a porter's wife in her Sunday best, "so you are all very happy? Your daughter is in luck." "Oh, happy! As for that, my daughter gives us 100 francs a month, while she rides in a carriage and eats off silver plate. She is a millionaire, is my daughter. Olympe might have lifted me above labor. To have to work at my age, is that being good to me?" "She ought not to be ungrateful, for she owes her beauty to you," replied Josepha. "But why did she not come to see me? It was I who placed her in ease by settling her with my uncle." "Yes, madame, with old Monsieur Thoul, but he is very old and broken." "But what have you done with him? Is he with you? She was very foolish to leave him. He is worth millions now." "Heaven above us!" cried the mother. "What did I tell her when she behaved so badly to him? And he as mild as milk, poor old fellow! Oh, didn't she just give it him hot? Olympe was perverted, madame." "But how?" "She got to know a claqueur, madame, saving your presence, a man paid to clap, you know, the grand nephew of an old mattress picker of the Faubourg Saint Marceau. This good for naught, as all your good looking fellows are, paid to make a piece go, is the cock of the walk out on the Boulevard du Temple, where he works up the new plays, and takes care that the actresses get a reception, as he calls it. First he has a good breakfast in the morning, then before the play he dines, to be up to the mark, as he says. In short, he is a born lover of billiards and drams. But that is not following a trade, as I said to Olympe." "It is a trade men follow, unfortunately," said Josepha. "Well, the rascal turned Olympe's head, and he, madame, did not keep good company, when I tell you he was very near being nabbed by the police in a tavern where thieves meet. However, Monsieur Braulard, the leader of the claque, got him out of that. He wears gold earrings, and he lives by doing nothing, hanging on to women, who are fools about these good-looking scamps. He spent all the money Monsieur Thoul used to give to the child. Then the business was going to grief. What embroidery brought in went out across the billiard table. However, the young fellow had a pretty sister, madame, who, like her brother, lived by hook and by crook, and no better than she should be neither, over in the students' quarter." "One of the sluts at the Chaumiere," said Josepha. "So, madame," said the old woman. "So Idamore, his name is Idamore, leastways, that is what he calls himself, for his real name is Chardin, Idamore fancied that your uncle had a deal more money than he owned to, and he managed to send his sister Elodie, and that was a stage name he gave her, to send her to be a workwoman at our place, without my daughter's knowing who she was. And gracious goodness, but that girl turned the whole place topsy turvy. She got all those poor girls into mischief. Impossible to whitewash them, saving your presence. And she was so sharp, she won over poor old Thoul, and took him away, and we don't know where, and left us in a pretty fix with a lot of bills coming in. To this day, as ever is, we have not been able to settle up. But my daughter, who knows all about such things, keeps an eye on them as they fall due. Then, when Idamore saw he had got hold of the old man, through his sister, you understand, he threw over my daughter, and now he has got hold of a little actress at the Funambule. And that was how my daughter came to get married, as you will see." "But you must know where the mattress picker lives?" said Josepha. "What, old Chardin? As if he lived anywhere at all. He is drunk by 6 in the morning, he makes a mattress once a month, he hangs about the wine shops all day, he plays at pools." "He plays at pools?" said Josepha. "You do not understand, madame. Pools of billiards, I mean, and he wins 3 or 4 a day, and then he drinks." "Water out of the pools, I suppose," said Josepha. "But if Idamore haunts the boulevard, by inquiring through my friend Vrolard, we could find him." "I don't know, madame. All this was 6 months ago. Idamore was one of the sort who are bound to find their way into the police courts, and from that to Melun, and the who knows?" "To the prison yard," said Josepha. "Well, madame, you know everything," said the old woman, smiling. "Well, if my girl had never known that scamp, she would now be Still, she was in luck all the same, you will say, for Monsieur Grenouville fell so much in love with her that he married her." "And what brought that about?" "Olympe was desperate, madame, when she found herself left in the lurch for that little actress, and she took a rod out of pickle for her, I can tell you. My word, but she gave her a dressing! And when she had lost poor old Toul, who worshipped her, she would have nothing more to say to the men. However, Monsieur Grenouville, who had been dealing largely with us, to the tune of 200 embroidered China crape shawls every quarter, he wanted to console her, but whether or no, she would not listen to anything without the mayor and the priest. 'I mean to be respectable,' said she, 'or perish,' and she stuck to it. Monsieur Grenouville consented to marry her on condition of her giving us all up, and we agreed." "For a handsome consideration?" said Josepha, with her usual perspicacity. "Yes, madame, 10,000 francs, and an allowance to my father, who is past work." "I begged your daughter to make old Toul happy, and she has thrown me over. That is not fair. I will take no interest in any one for the future. That is what comes of trying to do good. Benevolence certainly does not answer as a speculation. Olympe ought at least to have given me notice of this jobbing. Now, if you find the old man Toul within a fortnight, I will give you 1,000 francs." "It will be a hard task, my good lady. Still, there are a good many 5-franc pieces in 1,000 francs, and I will try to earn your money." "Good morning, then, Madame Bijou." On going into the boudoir, the singer found that Madame Hulot had fainted; but in spite of having lost consciousness, her nervous trembling kept her still perpetually shaking, as the pieces of a snake that has been cut up still wriggle and move. Strong salts, cold water, and all the ordinary remedies were applied to recall the Baroness to her senses, or rather to the apprehension of her sorrows. "Ah, mademoiselle, how far has he fallen!" cried she, recognizing Josepha, and finding that she was alone with her. "Take heart, madame," replied the actress, who had seated herself on a cushion at Adeline's feet, and was kissing her hands. "We shall find him, and if he is in the mire, well, he must wash himself. Believe me, with people of good breeding, it is a matter of clothes. Allow me to make up for you the harm I have done you, for I see how much you are attached to your husband, in spite of his misconduct, or you should not have come here. Well, you see, the poor man is so fond of women. If you had had a little of our dash, you would have kept him from running about the world, for you would have been what we can never be, all the women man wants. The State ought to subsidize a school of manners for honest women. But governments are so prudish. Still, they are guided by men whom we privately guide. My word, I pity nations. But the matter in question is how you can be helped, and not to laugh at the world. Well, madame, be easy. Go home again, and do not worry. I will bring your Hector back to you, as he was as a man of 30. "Ah, mademoiselle, let us go to see that Madame Grenouville," said the Baroness. "She surely knows something. Perhaps I may see the Baron this very day, and be able to snatch him at once from poverty and disgrace." "Madame, I will show you the deep gratitude I feel towards you by not displaying the stage singer Josepha, the Duc d'Herouville's mistress, in the company of the noblest, saintliest image of virtue. I respect you too much to be seen by your side. This is not acted humility, it is sincere homage. You make me sorry, madame, that I cannot tread in your footsteps, in spite of the thorns that tear your feet and hands. But it cannot be helped. I am one with art, as you are one with virtue." "Poor child!" said the Baroness, moved amid her own sorrows by a strange sense of compassionate sympathy. "I will pray to God for you are the victim of society, which must have theatres. When you are old, repent. You will be heard if God vouchsafes to hear the prayers of a martyr, madame," Josepha put in, and she respectfully kissed the Baroness' skirt. But Adeline took the actress' hand, and drawing her towards her, kissed her on the forehead. Coloring with pleasure, Josepha saw the Baroness into the hackney coach with the humblest politeness. "It must be some visiting lady of charity," said the manservant to the maid, "for she does not do so much for any one, not even for her dear friend Madame Jenny Cadine." "Wait a few days," said she, "and you will see him, madame, or I renounce the God of my fathers, and that from a Jewess, you know, is a promise of success." At the very time when Madame Hulot was calling on Josepha, Victorin, in his study, was receiving an old woman of about 75, who, to gain admission to the lawyer, had used the terrible name of the head of the detective force. The man in waiting announced: "Madame de Saint Esteve." "I have assumed one of my business names," said she, taking a seat. Victorin felt a sort of internal chill at the sight of this dreadful old woman. Though handsomely dressed, she was terrible to look upon, for her flat, colorless, strongly marked face, furrowed with wrinkles, expressed a sort of cold malignity. Marat, as a woman of that age, might have been like this creature, a living embodiment of the Reign of Terror. This sinister old woman's small, pale eyes twinkled with a tiger's bloodthirsty greed. Her broad, flat nose, with nostrils expanded into oval cavities, breathed the fires of hell, and resembled the beak of some evil bird of prey. The spirit of intrigue lurked behind her low, cruel brow. Long hairs had grown from her wrinkled chin, betraying the masculine character of her schemes. Any one seeing that woman's face would have said that artists had failed in their conceptions of Mephistopheles. "My dear sir," she began with a patronizing air, "I have long since given up active business of any kind. What I have come to you to do, I have undertaken for the sake of my dear nephew, whom I love more than I could love a son of my own. Now, the head of the police, to whom the president of the council said a few words in his ear as regards yourself, in talking to Monsieur Chapuzot, thinks as the police ought not to appear in a matter of this description, you understand. They gave my nephew a free hand, but my nephew will have nothing to say to it, except as before the council. He will not be seen in it." "Then your nephew is " "You have hit it, and I am rather proud of him," said she, interrupting the lawyer, "for he is my pupil, and he soon could teach his teacher. We have considered this case and have come to our own conclusions. Will you hand over 30,000 francs to have the whole thing taken off your hands? I will make a clean sweep of all, and you need not pay till the job is done." "Do you know the persons concerned?" "No, my dear sir, I look for information from you. What we are told is that a certain old idiot has fallen into the clutches of a widow. This widow, of 29, has played her cards so well that she has 40,000 francs a year, of which she has robbed 2 fathers of families. She is now about to swallow down 80,000 francs a year by marrying an old boy of 61. She will thus ruin a respectable family and hand over this vast fortune to the child of some lover by getting rid at once of the old husband. That is the case as stated." "Quite correct," said Victorin. "My father-in-law, Monsieur Crevel—" "Formerly a perfumer, a mayor. Yes, I live in his district, under the name of Mame Nourrisson," said the woman. "The other person is Madame Marneffe." "I do not know," said Madame de Saint Esteve, "but within 3 days I will be in a position to count her shifts." "Can you hinder the marriage?" asked Victorin. "How far have they got?" "To the second time of asking. We must carry off the woman. To day is Sunday. There are but 3 days, for they will be married on Wednesday, no doubt. That is impossible. But she may be killed." Victorin Hulot started with an honest man's horror at hearing these 5 words uttered in cold blood. "Murder?" said he. "And how could you do it?" "For 40 years now, monsieur, we have played the part of Fate," replied she, with terrible pride, "and do just what we will in Paris. More than one family, even in the Faubourg Saint Germain, has told me all its secrets, I can tell you. I have made and spoiled many a match. I have destroyed many a will, and saved many a man's honor. I have in there," and she tapped her forehead, "a store of secrets which are worth 36,000 francs a year to me. And you will be one of my lambs. Oh! Could such a woman as I am be what I am if she revealed her ways and means? I act. Whatever I may do, sir, will be the result of an accident. You need feel no remorse. You will be like a man cured by a clairvoyant. By the end of the month, it seems all the work of nature." Victorin broke out in a cold sweat. The sight of an executioner would have shocked him less than this prolix and pretentious sister of the hulks. As he looked at her purple red gown, she seemed to him dyed in blood. "Madame, I do not accept the help of your experience and skill if success is to cost anybody's life, or the least criminal act is to come of it." "You are a great baby, monsieur," replied the woman. "You wish to remain blameless in your own eyes, while you want your enemy to be overthrown." Victorin shook his head in denial. "Yes," she went on, "you want this Madame Marneffe to drop the prey she has between her teeth. But how do you expect to make a tiger drop his piece of beef? Can you do it by patting his back and saying, 'Poor puss'? You are illogical. You want a battle fought, but you object to blows. Well, I grant you the innocence you are so careful over. I have always found that there was material for hypocrisy in honesty. One day, 3 months hence, a poor priest will come to beg of you 40,000 francs for a pious work, a convent to be rebuilt in the Levant, in the desert. If you are satisfied with your lot, give the good man the money. You will pay more than that into the treasury. It will be a mere trifle in comparison with what you will get, I can tell you." She rose, standing on the broad feet that seemed to overflow her satin shoes. She smiled, bowed, and vanished. "The devil has a sister," said Victorin, rising. He saw the hideous stranger to the door, a creature called up from the dens of the police, as on the stage a monster comes up from the third cellar at the touch of a fairy's wand in a ballet extravaganza. After finishing what he had to do at the courts, Victorin went to call on Monsieur Chapuzot, the head of one of the most important branches of the Central Police, to make some inquiries about the stranger. Finding Monsieur Chapuzot alone in his office, Victorin thanked him for his help. "You sent me an old woman who might stand for the incarnation of the criminal side of Paris." Monsieur Chapuzot laid his spectacles on his papers and looked at the lawyer with astonishment. "I should not have taken the liberty of sending anybody to see you without giving you notice beforehand or a line of introduction," said he. "Then it was Monsieur le Prefet?" "I think not," said Chapuzot. "The last time that the Prince de Wissembourg dined with the Minister of the Interior, he spoke to the Prefet of the position in which you find yourself, a deplorable position, and asked him if you could be helped in any friendly way. The Prefet, who was interested by the regrets His Excellency expressed as to this family affair, did me the honor to consult me about it. Ever since the present Prefet has held the reins of this department, so useful and so vilified, he has made it a rule that family matters are never to be interfered in. He is right in principle and in morality, but in practice he is wrong. In the 45 years that I have served in the police, it did, from 1799 till 1815, great services in family concerns. Since 1820, a constitutional government and the press have completely altered the conditions of existence. So my advice, indeed, was not to intervene in such a case, and the Prefet did me the honor to agree with my remarks. The head of the detective branch has orders, in my presence, to take no steps. So if you have had any one sent to you by him, he will be reprimanded. It might cost him his place. The police will do this or that is easily said. The police, the police! But, my dear sir, the Marshal and the Ministerial Council do not know what the police is. The police alone knows the police. But as for ours, only Fouché, Monsieur Lenoir, and Monsieur de Sartine have had any notion of it. Everything is changed now. We are reduced and disarmed. I have seen many private disasters develop, which I could have checked with 5 grains of despotic power. We shall be regretted by the very men who have crippled us when they, like you, stand face to face with some moral monstrosities which ought to be swept away as we sweep away mud. In public affairs, the police is expected to foresee everything, or when the safety of the public is involved. But the family? It is sacred. I would do my utmost to discover and hinder a plot against the king's life. I would see through the walls of a house. But as to laying a finger on a household, or peeping into private interests, never, so long as I sit in this office. I should be afraid." "Of what?" "Of the press, Monsieur le Député, of the Left Centre." "What then can I do?" said Hulot after a pause. "Well, you are the family," said the official. "That settles it. You can do what you please. But as to helping you, as to using the police as an instrument of private feelings and interests, how is it possible? There lies, you see, the secret of the persecution, necessary but pronounced illegal by the bench, which was brought to bear against the predecessor of our present chief detective. Bibi Lupin undertook investigations for the benefit of private persons. This might have led to great social dangers. With the means at his command, the man would have been formidable, an underlying fate." "But in my place?" said Hulot. "Why, you ask my advice, you who sell it?" replied Monsieur Chapuzot. "Come, come, my dear sir, you are making fun of me." Hulot bowed to the functionary and went away without seeing that gentleman's almost imperceptible shrug as he rose to open the door. "And he wants to be a statesman," said Chapuzot to himself as he returned to his reports. Victorin went home, still full of perplexities which he could confide to no one. At dinner, the Baroness joyfully announced to her children that within a month their father might be sharing their comforts, and end his days in peace among his family. "Oh, I would gladly give my 3,600 francs a year to see the Baron here!" cried Lisbeth. "But, my dear Adeline, do not dream beforehand of such happiness, I entreat you." "Lisbeth is right," said Celestine. "My dear mother, wait till the end." The Baroness, all feeling and all hope, related her visit to Josepha, expressed her sense of the misery of such women in the midst of good fortune, and mentioned Chardin, the mattress picker, the father of the Oran storekeeper, thus showing that her hopes were not groundless. By 7 next morning, Lisbeth had driven in a hackney coach to the Quai de la Tournelle, and stopped the vehicle at the corner of the Rue de Poissy. "Go to the Rue des Bernardins," said she to the driver. "Number 7, a house with an entry and no porter. Go up to the 4th floor, ring at the door to the left, on which you will see Mademoiselle Chardin, lace and shawls mended. She will answer the door. Ask for the Chevalier. She will say he is out. Say in reply, 'Yes, I know, but find him, for his bonne is out on the quay in a coach, and wants to see him.'" 20 minutes later, an old man, who looked about 80, with perfectly white hair, and a nose reddened by the cold, and a pale, wrinkled face like an old woman's, came shuffling slowly along in list slippers, a shiny alpaca overcoat hanging on his stooping shoulders, no ribbon at his buttonhole, the sleeves of an undervest showing below his coat cuffs, and his shirt front unpleasantly dingy. He approached timidly, looked at the coach, recognized Lisbeth, and came to the window. "Why, my dear cousin, what a state you are in!" "Elodie keeps everything for herself," said Baron Hulot. "Those Chardins are a blackguard crew." "Will you come home to us?" "Oh, no, no!" cried the old man. "I would rather go to America." Adeline is on the scent. "Oh, if only some one would pay my debts!" said the Baron, with a suspicious look, "for Samanon is after me." "We have not paid up the arrears yet. Your son still owes 100,000 francs." "Poor boy!" "And your pension will not be free before 7 or 8 months. If you will wait a minute, I have 2,000 francs here." The Baron held out his hand with fearful avidity. "Give it me, Lisbeth, and may God reward you. Give it me, I know where to go." "But you will tell me, old wretch?" "Yes, yes. Then I can wait 8 months, for I have discovered a little angel, a good child, an innocent thing, not old enough to be depraved." "Do not forget the police court," said Lisbeth, who flattered herself that she would some day see Hulot there. "No, it is in the Rue de Charonne," said the Baron, "a part of the town where no fuss is made about anything. No one will ever find me there. I am called Pere Thorec, Lisbeth, and I shall be taken for a retired cabinet maker. The girl is fond of me, and I will not allow my back to be shorn any more." "No, that has been done," said Lisbeth, looking at his coat. "Supposing I take you there?" Baron Hulot got into the coach, deserting Mademoiselle Elodie without taking leave of her, as he might have tossed aside a novel he had finished. In half an hour, during which Baron Hulot talked to Lisbeth of nothing but little Atala Judici, for he had fallen by degrees to those base passions that ruin old men, she set him down with 2,000 francs in his pocket in the Rue de Charonne, Faubourg Saint Antoine, at the door of a doubtful and sinister looking house. "Good day, cousin. So now you are to be called Thorec, I suppose. Send none but commissionaires if you need me, and always take them from different parts." "Trust me. Oh, I am really very lucky," said the Baron, his face beaming with the prospect of new and future happiness. "No one can find him there," said Lisbeth, and she paid the coach at the Boulevard Beaumarchais, and returned to the Rue Louis le Grand in the omnibus. Chapter 34